Open your mind.
Good evening and welcome to Open Your Mind Internet Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
Myself, Stephen George.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for being with us. Show 27, Sunday the 9th of January. We've had the Christmas, we've had the New Year, and the weather has come back. Well, where we are anyway, the weather has come back.
It's icy and snowy and cold.
And be very, very careful out there on the roads. Now, our planned guest for tonight was David Wilcock.
Now, don't say was.
Okay, I won't say was. We have sent information off to David, and he did email us back confirming that everything's ready to go ahead for the show tonight. For some reason, I don't know why, we haven't heard from David just yet.
I wonder, is he having a lie on, maybe? What time is it in LA?
I don't know. Los Angeles is probably about 8:30, something like that. In the
morning?
Yeah, 8:30, 9:30 in the morning.
Ooh.
So he could be having a lie on. So we will probably assume that David will dial in during the show, hopefully. And we'll be able to pick up from there. So, but for the time being, we'll just go through all our preliminary stuff and then we'll catch up on what's been going on, because we've been off air for about 2 weeks, haven't we?
Absolutely, 2 weeks. 2 weeks of snow and ice, basically, and cold weather.
Snow and ice, Christmas, kids screaming, bringing presents that don't work, back to the shops, usual stuff.
Back to the shops, yeah, because, well, obviously you can't send them back to Santa Claus now, sure you can't.
No.
Right. Okay. We communication channels. info@oymIreland.com is our email address, as always. We do have the guest book, as per usual, and I'm not going to say anything about the guest book at the moment. We will come to that later on. We also have the chat facility on the website. That's OYMIreland.com. Navigate your way to the online chat, log in, and chat away.
Yeah, basically we have the online chat, so you can just log in, and if you want to ask us anything, or if David comes on, you can ask David a few questions as well. One of the things that we've been asked by a few people was about having a Facebook page for Open Your Mind.
Okay.
And one of the things, I don't know, I probably said it to you before Christmas, I don't know. Whether we should or not have a Facebook page. So, that's something that we think we might look at. If there's interest there, if people think it's a good idea, send us an email or send us a guest book message.
Well, should we not just set one up anyway?
Yeah.
I'll tell you why I'm saying that is, I mean, if you remember years and years and years ago, when a lot of business would have had, in their office, they would have had a phone, they would have had their phone number, and that would have been their main line of communication. And I only heard this during the week, that back in the early days, the mid to late 1990s, when email came about, and a lot of offices kind of shunned email. They said that'll never take off, it's never going to work. And look at it today, number one means of communication. So I mean, I think if we are promoting what we are promoting, I think a Facebook page is just kind of keeping up with the times. I don't think it'll do any harm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we'll look into it then. It's like that quote from the guy who, in the late 18th century, said, "Everything that has been invented, or can be invented, has been invented," and that was the late 1800s. How wrong was he? So, technology, develops and evolves and everything else. Okay, the donations thermometer. It's I don't know whether it's the cold.
I think it's frozen.
I think it's frozen.
So, we need some people to click on that and start moving again.
That's it. So if you have $1 or $2, €3 or whatever, spare change, whatever, if you can just, if you don't mind donating, that'd be fantastic. We are trying to get the telephone device, which we can have our listeners call in to the show, which will be ideal. So if we can do that, that'd be fantastic. And we just say that, we hope everybody had a great Christmas and New Year. Hopefully 2011 is going to be a better year for all of us. But just to touch base on a couple of shows. The Truth Agenda, the Sovereign Independent presents The Truth Agenda, which is on this January on the 22nd. Tickets are going well and can be purchased via the Sovereign website and obviously on One World Scam. We recommend booking early to avoid disappointment there. So if you can book tickets. The Cork show will be on the Thursday, the 20th. 20th of January, starts at 5 at the Mononty Hotel, Middle Glenmore Road. Speakers Lord Christopher Monckton, William Endall, Scott Tips, Dave Derby, and tickets are on sale. It's basically the same event but in Cork, and if you go to the front page of the OYM Ireland website, you'll see the actual the flyer there for all the information. So,
and that is going to be fantastic. Both events are going to be fantastic. So, well, I mean, if you can make it, go.
Well, we're going to be there anyway because it's going to be fantastic. The speakers that are going to be on are just, they'll have so much information, so well worth it if you can make it, do it, and pop down there. So, Steve, how was your week?
I knew you were going to ask me that.
There you go. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. Well, my week's been fine. It's been the usual up and down to work, and now with this new snow that has arrived. Well, obviously it's not snowing in Dublin. It's only snowing where we are, in the secret location in the bunker. It's been a kind of a mixed bag week. As I said to you just before we come on there. I actually did have a politician knock at the door yesterday. Obviously, he's going to be the very first of many politicians, and it was the one and only Damien English representing Fine Gael. Now, I absolutely was up to my tonsils in the house yesterday, so didn't really have much of a chance to get down and dirty with Damien. So I took his details off him, and I got a lovely free pen with his phone number on it. Now, I probably will ring him at some stage if he doesn't reply to the email. But I did sit down last night and sent him a nice email. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I just touched on a few subjects that are close to my heart at the moment, and just wanted to maybe see where Damien's headspace is on those issues. So, I mean, yeah, watch this space. I mean, if he does get back to me, I'll have more information, possibly next week.
Excellent. Okay. Anything else?
Not that I'm aware of, unless I'm forgetting something.
Same old stuff for the Christmas.
Yeah, I know the Christmas. I think, like everyone in the country, Christmas was quiet. It was very quiet. It was cold. We didn't have. We lost water. I know you lost water for a while. I think a lot of people did. Yeah. And even today, pressure is still not. It's still not back to normal. But Christmas was a humble Christmas, really.
It was the weather was, it's great seeing the snow for a few days, but when you see it for like 4 weeks, and then we thought we got rid of it, and then all of a sudden we have it back again. Where we are anyway, we have it back.
What did we have? Was it a couple of days, about 2 or 3 days of
2 inches, about of
no,
snow.
I mean, I think we had a couple of 2 or 3 days without snow.
Yeah, and then they came back
and
again.
then it came back with the ice and the frost.
And it was such a pleasure to drive on the road without worrying that you're going to go off.
Yeah,
unlike
coming up here again tonight.
Yeah,
I tell you, folks.
Actually, that program, Skating on Ice is on. It's starting tonight.
Yeah, it started already.
You should do that, skating on ice on your car.
I tell you.
Okay, something of interest for our listeners. We know there's going to be an election coming up shortly. A general election, and there's so many people Fianna Fáil jumping ship at the moment. It's unbelievable. Last one out closed the door, because
off the lights,
they all seem to be jumping because they know they're not going to get back in. Now, I'm not a kind of political person at all, and I would generally probably not be bothered because I kind of tar them all with the same brush to a certain extent. But during the Christmas, my mind was kind of open to Sinn Féin. Now, as I say, I'm not a political person. I've never voted Sinn Féin before, and it's not something I actually considered. But things I found out which I found were quite interesting, and you can check this out yourself, guys and girls. Here's 3 things about Sinn Féin which I didn't know. The first one is, the way the TDs get a massive salary, 120 grand or whatever, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, apparently Sinn Féin TDs don't get that salary. They only get a standard, like, industrial salary, say 35 grand or whatever, and the rest of that money goes to the party.
Really?
Yeah. So they don't get paid the massive politician's wage. They only get a standard wage, 30, 40k.
So they're just like a regular person doing a regular job?
Regular person's job. So the rest of the money. So that I thought was quite interesting. The second one was, Sinn Féin is the only political party in Ireland that actually produce their accounts and publish their accounts on their website for everybody to see what's spending and where the money's going.
Surely you must be jesting.
Would you believe I went to Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and Labour's website, and none of the websites had any financial information as to where the money was going? Now, I think transparency is very important for a political party. How come there's only one party, which is Sinn Féin, being transparent, and the other three not being transparent?
No, obviously the ones who are not being transparent have maybe something to hide.
Possibly. There you go. Expenses could be one of them. And the third thing was, we know we all wanted, we voted no for Lisbon.
Yes, we did.
A lot of us, a lot of people voted no for Lisbon. Would you believe the only government party that voted no for Lisbon was Sinn Féin?
That is right.
All the other parties, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and Labour, all voted for the Lisbon Treaty except Sinn Féin. Now, there's three things of interest. Now, I spoke to a friend of mine who's actually supported Sinn Féin for a while, and he said to me, Alan, it's people like you and me that are in Sinn Féin. The painter, the decorator, the plumber, the electrician, the carpenter. They're the kind of guys who are in Sinn Féin. Not like these guys that are living in mansions out in the countryside with like 2 or 3 houses and all this stuff.
Chauffeur-driven cars, yeah.
The ordinary Joe Soaps, ordinary guys on the street who are in Sinn Féin. Now, I know certain people might have a certain opinion based on history, but at the end of the day, we will never move forward by looking back.
Absolutely. I mean, you know as well as I do, there are people who, the minute they hear the words Sinn Féin, they switch off.
Yeah.
They don't want to know. They don't listen because they've always voted Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. Yeah. Their fathers, their forefathers, they've always voted, blah, blah, blah. And the minute they hear the word Sinn Féin, it's like, oh, can't listen to that.
Yeah.
They immediately think Sinn Féin, IRA.
Yeah. And I've even heard, there's 1 or 2 people I was speaking to, and even though Fianna Fáil has basically corrupted the country and have did what they did, they're still going to vote Fianna Fáil. And you have to ask yourself, is that conditioning? Is that pure? It cannot be, or it's conditioning and ignorance, because it could not be because they still think the party's really good, based on what's gone on. I mean, that's unbelievable. It really, really is. So, for our listeners listening to the show, I'm not, advocating anything here. I'm just putting the information out there, because when I spoke to a friend of mine, as I say, who's a Sinn Féin supporter, I said, why isn't these 3 bits of information out in the media? And he said, well, the media is biased and they don't want Sinn Féin to get in because they can't control Sinn Féin. They can control the other parties to a certain extent, but they can't control Sinn Féin. So that's why Sinn Féin is not getting the air on the TV and on the radio, and they're not broadcasting this information because they don't want Sinn Féin to get in because they can't control them. And I thought, well, maybe that means that they're worried that Sinn Féin will actually get in and actually improve the country. I mean, Sinn Féin are in, I believe, up the north, and they're doing a brilliant job.
Yeah.
Now, they can't please everybody, and no government party can, but apparently they're doing a great job up there.
Well, I mean, look at Fianna Fáil, Sinn Féin can't please everybody all of the time, but Fianna Fáil are not pleasing anybody but themselves.
Well, if you
and these the bondholders.
Yeah.
They're not representing, as far as I'm concerned, the people who allegedly elected them, voted them in.
Well, that was the other thing. When I seen one of these political debates on RTE, the only politician who was a Sinn Féin politician was the guy who said, burn the bondholders. Why should we give them the money? They took a gamble, they lost. Tough. That's the way it is. And he was the only one that turned around and said it. Out of the other politicians that were there. So common sense prevails. So, I for one will be voting Sinn Féin. I'm not going to spoil the vote, or normally some people say I'm not going to bother. All we say is, look, if you're going to, don't spoil the vote, because it'll go to Fianna Fáil. Please vote, because if you don't, it'll go to Fianna Fáil. So if there's one party you're going to vote for, at least give them a try. Vote Sinn Féin. And if you don't have to believe what I'm saying, go and do the research yourself, check out the website, and you'll see the information's on there.
Now, obviously, as you said before, we're not affiliated with any political party.
No, definitely
we're not politically motivated.
No.
We're not telling people what way to vote.
No.
All we're saying is, don't disregard Sinn Féin. Have a look at what they stand for. Have a look at what they've done. Have a look at what their mandate is, what they plan to do if elected, and base your decision on all that information, and not just whether it's going to be FF or FG.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we had the Donegal by-elections there a while ago, and they were going to use that as a kind of template to see how the voting's going to go for Sinn Féin, apparently. And your man won outright, something like 14,000 votes outright. And maybe that's the people of Ireland talking, saying, right, enough is enough. We've had these clown parties in, and they've been in and out, and nothing has ever been sorted. So, what can really go bad if we vote with a different party in? Now, as I say, we're not affiliated, as Steve said, with any political party. So basically, just check out the information yourself, check it out and see what you think, and let us know. Keep us informed, and if there's any information. We do, we have the chat facility there, guys, so send us a link there, send us any information, any questions that you have. Steve, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, there's one in here now. Obviously, it's for David, if and when he does join us, but it's from one of our guests here, Special K. Not sure if they're affiliated with any breakfast cereal company. But the question that will be asked to David when he is in is, can he discuss his views on the power of manifestation of whatever we focus on, i.e. the here we go. Apocalyptic pessimists. That's the apocalyptic pessimists, such as Jordan Maxwell. Are they almost aiding the negative agenda by encouraging us to focus on a dark future? Would David agree that any degree of predicting or worrying about the future serves only to hinder us from living in the now? That's a good question.
Well, we
will ask him.
We can touch base on that. Basically, it's all about, for me anyway, my understanding the last few months I've been doing is understanding the energy and the flow of energy. And vibrations, and because we all vibrate on a frequency, and I've always said before in the show that we are spiritual beings experiencing life through physical form. End of. So the fact that we're vibrating on a frequency, and everything vibrates on a different frequency, and a higher frequency is the positive love frequency, and a lower frequency is the negative fear frequency. So if you have people that are kind of the glass is half empty and always on the negative, I always find these people, now I'm just saying this is my own experience, that in my own experience, that these people tend to get colds, and there's always problems and there's always issues. Where if you're kind of always a positive person, the glass is always half full. You see life differently, and if you're a positive person, people are attracted to positive people. People are attracted to positive energy. That's a fact. So the more positive you are, the more people around you will be attracted to you. The other thing is that, to make sure you keep this positive energy around you, have a look at the 6 people around you and ask yourself, the 6 closest people around you, okay? And ask yourself, are them 6 people positive or negative? Is the glass half full or half empty? And if the glass is half empty, then you might...
It's time to go to the bar and get them
you might need to change them. Because, either consciously or subconsciously, we do emulate these people around us, our friends and family. And if you always have somebody that's kind of always moaning and giving out, they take care, sometimes you feel drained. There's a name for them called energy vampires, as you say. And you talk to these people, and when you finish talking to them, you feel, God, you feel that your energy is taken, but you're not too sure why. So you have to look at the 6 people around you and ask yourself, are them 6 people positive people or negative people? And that's what you need to do. And so if Jordan Maxwell is talking about the... you say that. The
apocalyptic pessimistics.
That's brilliant.
Is there an easier way to say that?
Yeah, miserable shits.
Oh, God.
That's probably it. They're always
said
doom.
The S word.
I know, they're doom and gloom. Yeah, no. If Gordon Maxwell's doing that, at the end of the day, you have your own mind, you have your own energy. It's up to you. Do the research and check it out. I think. There has been prophecies, but a prophecy is something that will happen if we don't change what we're doing now. So what we have to do is start from ourselves and start being positive and start being focused.
Here's a question for you: would you say a prophecy is something that will come true definitely, or do you reckon it's kind of something that's put out there and that we can once we're aware of it, that we can change it?
I think prophecy is something that won't happen if we change what we're doing.
Yeah.
I think a prophecy is if we carry on doing what we're doing, then it's inevitable. I mean, if you remember what Ian Crane said when myself and Steve went to see Ian Crane and Jim Corr Drogheda, Ian Crane said he was in the Alps and he was meeting these people that lived there. They lived something like 16,000 feet up in the Alps. They went up there originally 25 generations ago to get away from the conquistadors who were, devastating the lands and, raping, pillage and all that kind of stuff. So 25 generations later, these tribal people come down, and Ian Crane got talking to them, and he said, why did you come down after 25 generations? And he said, to tell the people 90% of the people have to leave the planet. And he said, why do 90% of the people have to leave the planet? He said, because they're not in harmony with the planet. There's a prophecy that says that if we don't change what we're doing, the planet is going to be destroyed, or things are going to happen on the planet. And this is their prophecy, which is passed down through their generations. Now, if you look at the Aztecs and the Mayans and everything else, the Hopi Indians, the I Ching, all these have kind of prophecies and predictions of what may go on. But we have the ability to change, and I think the global awakening that's taking place at the moment on a daily basis is phenomenal. More and more people beginning to wake up and realise what's going on and start asking questions. So we do have the ability to change. David, 2012 Enigma, which is available on the OYM website, David actually talks about the 2012 situation, and he goes into it in detail, and this kind of wave or this photon belt that's coming in, or should be actually in at the moment, really, because we're so near to 2012 at the moment. And there's loads of predictions out there. I've heard all kind of sides. I've heard some people saying that, it's only going to be a gust of wind and that's it. And other people saying, there's going to be devastation on the planet because the planet's out balanced between 15 and 23 degrees, and it has to be rebalanced, and hence why we're having weather conditions that we've never had before, because the north and south poles are going to be changing. I've gone through, I've done a good bit of research on both sides, and even now, after doing all that, I still couldn't give you an answer as what the prediction will be. I mean, maybe it is a celestial change, but it's a change of people waking up to what's going on. Maybe that's all it is. Maybe it's just it's spiritual enlightenment, or it's just people are going to begin to realise that who we really are, and we're not worker bees for the global elite. And the way things are going, I did look at a later video cast from David. And I wanted to talk to him about it. I mean, as I say, David still might come in. And it's basically he's saying that the Illuminati are actually on the run at the moment. And he said he doesn't condone violence, but he said these guys who are in the Illuminati are actually getting tortured and killed. Now, I forget which video cast this was on. Was it on the MP3 one? Did I send you the MP3 one? I think I sent you.
I do remember seeing. I know what you're talking about. I do remember seeing it. But
if I track it down, what I'll do is I'll put it on the website. We'll put it on the website for you, so you can see what David's saying about the Illuminati and the fact that actually they're scrambling around trying to put things in place, but it's not working because people are beginning to wake up and realise. And one of the quotes through history was, the only thing that the Illuminati are afraid of is the fact that people will become politically aware and start waking up. That's what they're afraid of, and that's what's happening now. But we have a few more questions coming in. Do you want to take them?
No,
Dave?
we don't.
Well, do you want to read out what they're saying there?
Okay, I'll read it out, but I'm not sure if it was actually supposed to be read out. But we'll just say to our special K listener, we're being listened to over in Essex in the UK, and the special K only came across our site when they decided that they were going to move to Mayo because they have relations in Mayo. So they found us through the Tyrannosaur and the Sovereign Independent, and they're just trying to hook up with like-minded people. before they actually move over to
Excellent,
Pineal.
excellent. Well, that's the amount of feedback. We also say, if you want to pop along to the guest book on the website, we've had actually a lot of people, well, not about 8 more comments actually on the website from different people. One person being in Australia, and another website, Dark Side of the Moon, which is obviously Pink Floyd album, I think. And a radio station up in Donegal, and a few of the guests on board talking about things, and putting their comments down, which is fantastic. So that's what we want. We want to educate the people. We want to get the information out there as best we can, and actually have guests on. Again, we apologise. We don't know what the situation is with David. We did clarify with David yesterday that he'd be on the show. Maybe he has some technical problems. I don't know.
Yeah, he probably has a hangover.
Could be.
I mean, it's Sunday morning for him, isn't it?
It's Sunday morning for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's implying that he's a drinker. He mightn't be a drinker. He might be just...
Okay, he's lying in the gutter somewhere.
He might have some technical problems. That's probably what it is.
I know. I mean, if he comes in, he comes in. Maybe he's running a little bit late. We just keep sending him some positive thoughts.
That's it.
And just if I can just mention real quick that, well, am I in a rush? I'll mention it slowly.
Yeah.
If anyone is on the chat facility, if they want to send a private message, because sometimes whatever comes in, we're not 100% sure if, the individual would like it read out or not. But if you want something just to send, you want to send something private, you will see a list of names to the right hand side, and myself and Alan are down as admin. So all you have to do is just left click on the name of the person whom you wish to send a private message to. A little box will open up, and just click private message. And that might maybe alleviate any confusion on my part.
Yeah, no, that'd be that's cool. Give us your comments. Now, what we're going to do is going to go to a bit of music, and when we come back, we did have a number of questions which we had for David to talk to him about. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the questions anyway, because we have listeners, and you can actually there's a chat facility there. If you want to comment on them as well, if you have any information on them, by all means, send us a chat message on it, and we can talk about it. But for the time being, we'll go to a bit of music, and we'll see you after the music. Right, we have a couple of messages on the chat facility, and one or two users are saying, because listeners are saying that there's a problem with the broadband. We know the broadband is a little bit slower tonight. We do know that. Good from here so far, brilliant. Yeah, the internet is a little bit on the slow side tonight. So bearing in mind that the podcast and the show is available near enough. As soon as the show is ended, you can go to Ustream and listen to the show, and the podcast is available within
milliseconds.
Within 24 hours, the podcast is available. Now, we had a request from Sue on the guest book saying, could we make podcasts available? And we had one or two of the listeners asking us for podcasts. So, your wish is our command. So on the website, as you're probably seeing, the podcasts are available for download. And the podcast is basically an MP3 file, which you download and you can stick in your iTunes for your iPod or your iPhone, or, your, I don't know, anything got to do with oil anyway.
And smoke it.
Yeah. And so any kind of MP3 player, any player that plays MP3, the podcast will work on. You just have to download it and then put it in your iTunes or whatever.
And maybe someday we'll have it available on vinyl as well. Yeah.
No, we're not going to take a walk, go backwards,
tape,
I think.
Maybe 8-track tape?
CD, that's what it's all. Right, okay, so what we're going to do is, so we apologise if you're getting a bit of a lousy connection there on the Ustream. There's nothing much we can really do with the internet speed at the moment. It has been kind of up and down, so we apologise for that. Now,
did you want to shout out something there about maybe something on the old thermometer?
Oh, yeah, listen, we'd like to say thank you to Kaylee. Kaylee, for a donation there on to our thermometer there. It's actually unfrozen now. It's going up. Everything helps, guys. Everything helps. the chat facility on the show is great, but being able to have people dial into the show and talk to us on the phone is even better. And this is why we need the telephone device. So, all donations, regardless of size, it doesn't matter. All helps towards getting the telephone device. So, thanks for everybody who makes a donation through PayPal. It's much appreciated, And
yeah, thanks to Kaylee. And maybe if we have the song, we might be able to play that song, Kaylee.
Well, if
can't remember who sang it though.
That's Kaylee. That's it was on the tip of my tongue there a minute ago.
Stick your tongue back out.
Yeah, yeah. Your man, his name was Fish.
Marillion. That's it.
Yeah. We'd have to see if we have it on our playlist. Or if there is a band that Kaylee likes, if she wants to send us a chat and tell us what band you like. And we'll see if we can have a song there for you.
And don't forget unsigned bands as well.
Unsigned bands, yeah. Basically, we're still looking for unsigned bands to play their music. So if you know any band that's unsigned and wants to have the demos played on air, by all means, get them to get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to play their music, their demo tracks, for our listeners. So it's no problem there. Okay, so we had a few questions for David, and a few questions which people have asked me to ask David, plus one or two questions that I had as well. So we're going to put this to listeners, and if you want to comment on them, by all means, give us a message through the chat facility there. And the questions are, basically number one, which we always ask all our guests, is about David's awakening. And how did he wake up? Obviously, David not being here, we can't ask him that. But one of the things that I was asked to talk to David about was UFOs. Now, some people go, oh, UFOs, da. Well, it's what we really wanted to put the UFO thing to bed. I think we can accept now that there are such things as UFOs and there is life on other planets. Pretty much so. Because and they've known about alien technology. They've had UFOs for a long time, and this is my understanding of it. I don't know whether, Steve, you've done any research in this, but this is my understanding of it. For over 100 years, they've known about aliens and UFOs, right? But they wanted to tell the people, but the problem is that people's collective consciousness of the planet wasn't ready for it. So they said, well, listen, we have to find out if people are ready for it. So what they did was, in the 1930s, they had the War of the Worlds, which is hosted a radio show by Orson Welles. I'm sure, we're not old enough to remember it, but I'm sure people have heard about it. And basically, they had a radio show. The normal radio station was going on, and then we have an announcement to make. There's lights coming from the sky and da. So it was a radio show made out to be real, and he wanted to get people's reaction. And apparently, through my research, the CIA, or the body who was previous to the CIA, funded this project to see if the people of the planet or people were ready for it. And what happened was people were running out into the streets with shotguns, hoping to shoot down UFOs and everything else. So they said the planet and the people are not ready for this. So they said they have to get the collective consciousness of the planet up to about 80 to 85%. Because if you imagine if they did turn around, the whole political system, the financial system, the religious structure, everything would fall down and collapse. So what they had to do is get the collective consciousness of the planet up to about 80-85%. So when they do turn around and say there are such things as UFOs, that people will go, yeah, we knew all about it. We knew that there was UFOs there. So one of the mediums they've used for a long time is Hollywood. And one of the first movies that was produced by Hollywood on that, funded by the military, was The Day the Earth Stood Still, which is a black and white movie. I think they've remade it for some reason. I have a funny feeling they've remade it, but I remember as a kid watching it years ago, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and the alien comes out of the UFO craft. And so after that we had our Star Wars and our Star Trek, and all these kinds of different shows got to do Buck Rogers and everything. All these shows to climatise and to condition us to understand that there are people out there. And even Ronald Reagan said it in a speech in the 80s that if we imagine, he said something like, I think the speech was, if we knew that there was people or aliens or human races on other planets, all their in fighting on the planet would stop. You know, so and one of the people who's doing this disclosure project is a chap called Dr. Stephen Greer, and Dr. Stephen Greer was an A&E doctor, I believe, and he took on the subject full time, and he has something like 450 people who swear in an affidavit. Regarding, they'll swear in the affidavit saying what they've seen. And these are all expert people in the fields, like aircraft pilots, military pilots, scientists, radar operators, all this kind of stuff. And the show, I think, is called, if you go to Google it, I think it's called NPP or something. They actually do this as a national press conference, and they actually do this in front of the national press, and they have 12 people on the stage. One lady actually worked with Von Braun, and he has 450 other people. So if all these people are experts, I mean, there's two ways to look at it. One, they're all delusional, or two, they all honest, and they're experts in the field, and they're telling us what they've seen. And even, you don't have to prove 10 UFOs. You just have to prove one, and then take it from there. And then we had Nick Pope, who worked in the UK government in the UFO sector. He's come out after 3 years of working there, saying that there are such things as UFOs, because he was the guy who had to cover them up for the actual the English government. So loads of information out there. So I think we can put the UFO thing to rest. And I think there's a chap in the 60s called Drake, who actually did an equation, and he said, with the billions and billions of planets and suns and stars and everything that's out there, what's the minimal amount out there that can actually sustain life and have life on it? And he said something like 10,000 based on his equation. So even like 10,000 planets that may have life is phenomenal. So we have to start thinking outside the box now. We have to realise that we are not the only planet with life on it. And if these planets, even if one planet was 10,000 years older than Earth and has evolved 10,000 years, how far would their technology be 10,000 years in advance? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. David Wilcock will be joining us momentarily.
Oh, fine. Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. That's good news. Oh. Okay, we'll just take David in there. Go ahead.
David.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, David. How are you doing?
Good morning or good afternoon to you.
Well, really sorry about that, guys. We had a mix-up on our scheduling over here, and I just got alerted to the fact that I was supposed to be on the air with you, so here I am.
Brilliant stuff. Well, David, we're going to throw you straight in because we've just been touching base. We actually just got to the second question, funny enough. So what we'll do is we're going to just backtrack a little bit because you know more about this information than we do, and you can enlighten us and our listeners. We have all our listeners are here, and we have a chat facility as well, which our listeners can pop on and send us in the chat message, and which is fantastic. So thanks a lot for jumping in. But we're gonna, if you don't mind, we're gonna kind of throw you in the deep end, if that's okay.
That's how I live.
Brilliant stuff. All right, David. What we normally do is when we have our guests on, what we do first, the first question we normally ask them is, what was your awakening? When did you wake up to what was going on? Because I've seen your 2012 Enigma and a lot of other shows that you've done, and there's fantastic information on these that you've done research. But you obviously had an awakening sometime, somewhere, and that made you think of there's something going on here. So can you kind of give us a background of when that awakening happened?
Sure. I was having very profound UFO dreams ever since I could remember having dreams. And in fact, some of these dreams involved the UFOs that I was seeing actually crashing, and then I would have to, I'd run over to them and try to help whoever was inside. I had other dreams in which I was inside the UFOs and I was talking to people in them, and there was one guy in particular who became Obi-Wan Kenobi after Star Wars came out. And that was interesting because, of course, Obi-Wan, when he was about to be killed by Darth Vader, he basically ascended and turned into a light being, and then in the rest of the movie, he shows up as this, being of light.
Yeah.
And this guy who I was talking to in the dreams was saying to me that there was going to be a very profound event that would happen on Earth that would affect everyone, that it was much more positive than people believed, and he wanted me to help people be ready for it. So that was all the way back, beginning like 1.5, 2 years old that I was having those dreams. Yeah.
And obviously, you were aware of the bigger picture. Obviously, the global elite side of things. Now, the last, I think it was a radio interview I was listening that you did, and you said in there, which is quite profound, that the Illuminati are on the run, and you don't condone violence, but these guys are being got and being tortured. Can you kind of elaborate on that and expand on it?
Wow, that's a tough question. I don't know how much I can say because I don't want to get in trouble, but
well, obviously we have to be careful.
Some covers have been blown. Some people who were working as double agents, deep undercover. I won't say where. And let's say that this is. This is on a whole different level than WikiLeaks. I mean, WikiLeaks has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, just so we're clear on that.
Okay.
But a lot of these guys are younger. They're mostly male from what I've been hearing, but younger guys. And the person I know has seen videos of these guys being tortured, and it is it's effectively a mutilation torture how they're being killed.
Who is doing this? Is this kind of some kind of right-wing faction that's just gone to the extreme and taken the law into their own hands?
Well, let's put it this way: if you have somebody who is working inside your country on a governmental level, and you've trusted this person for so long, and then you find out that they're working for an organization and feeding this organization information, and the organization itself is Luciferian and negative, you'd be pretty grumpy about that. And that's why this is happening, I guess.
Okay. Well, maybe what we'll do is we might touch base on it later on. There is a number of questions which I have for you, David, that
sure.
For myself and for people who've asked me to ask you, because they know your background. So let's we'll start off with the first one. It's basically putting the UFO the story to bed, because I think we can, the consciousness of the planet has reached about 85% now, and I think we can all accept the fact that it can't be just us on a planet with billions of stars and planets out there. And I've done a good bit of research, based on the Orson Welles 1930s War of the Worlds, which is apparently part of a program to see if people were ready for the information, and obviously they weren't. So part of that process was to start conditioning and educating people and get them acclimatized. So when they do turn around and when I know you mentioned something Obama going on stage with an alien on November 27th, and that was kind of you talked about it, but you didn't commit to it because you were afraid that if it was blown they wouldn't do it, and they didn't do it. Can you kind of give us some information on what you know about the UFO thing, and we'll just put this to bed once and for all, and what you think's going to be happening with the Obama Alien Expo?
Sure. My understanding, which I talked about in this disclosure thing I did with Kerry Cassidy and Richard Hogan recently, is that there is a comprehensive disclosure plan that's being implemented within the White House, within the American governmental apparatus. And here's what I was told by an attorney in Washington, D.C., who has connections with senators and congressmen. He told me that there is a twofold plan. There is a legislative branch plan, and there is an executive branch plan. The problem with the executive branch, and they're genuinely concerned about this, is that if the president was to call upon anyone who knows anything about this subject and try to get them to speak, then he is effectively getting that person to break their security oath that they swore to. And as a result, he would then be able to be charged by the right-wingers for a high crime and misdemeanor, which is an impeachable offense. So that's what he's going up against. He cannot actually just say, okay, Mr. So-and-so, you worked for McDonnell Douglas on an aeronautics program, and you're claiming now that you actually reverse-engineered propulsion systems from recovered alien craft. So could you please tell the American people what you did? He can't do that. He would be completely thrown out of office by the right-wingers, because what's going to happen, what they expect is going to happen when they make this announcement is it's going to be a prolonged battle with people who don't want to believe it. It's not going to be like everybody just says, oh, wow, it's true. So that's the first part. So what they're expecting is that there will be events that are going to happen, which the president will then respond to by saying that he wants to ask Congress to create a new Blue Book investigation. They're going to reopen Blue Book or something similar to it. Then the second part of that is that if the president isn't willing to do that, and this is from other factions that are saying this now, but if the president isn't willing to do that, then Congress is going to actually respond to further events that happen by saying they want to open a Blue Book investigation. And at that time, they're going to use the witnesses that have already come out in things like the seminar you saw earlier at the National Press Club in 2009, where they described nuclear missile installations being powered down by UFOs. Those same types of witnesses are going to be called and subpoenaed to be testifying before Congress on these issues. And then when these hearings happen, there will be a sequence of events in which a lot of press is generated. All of the things that we know are going to be brought out in the open. And then depending on the speed with which the momentum picks up, it's supposedly going to be a 3-stage process. But then the other thing you have to remember is that they deal with windows. And windows mean you can't plan a particular date for something unless the window is there for that to happen. And the biggest window that they are waiting for in terms of disclosure is for the groups that have all the money to murder people who try to stop them from being able to talk. And that's, I believe, why you see Gabrielle Giffords just got shot here. Because she is involved with a man who's an astronaut. And I think, given the fact that she's very close to Obama, and given the fact that she was a progressive Democrat who had power, you start doing the math, and there's a strong implication that her husband, because believe me, NASA, you don't have to go very high in NASA to know an awful lot of stuff. When you start putting 2 and 2 together, and I think that she was aiding disclosure in some way. This kid who did it obviously was under military-influenced mind control. He admitted on his YouTube page that he was in the military, so they were really sloppy. They did this kind of last minute, and I think they're going to get caught. I think people are wising up to this. I think they're wising up to all the birds falling out of the sky. Which is part of the...
Yeah, we got the news over here about that. His name was Brad something, and he said a typical thing where he was a loner and everything else. And I think 5 people were killed, and there's a lot of people hurt. And it's kind of a typical scenario for mind control. You know, whether it's MK Ultra or whatever their new version of that is, I don't know.
You can go to his YouTube page and watch the videos that he made about mind control. I mean, it's not, you know. I don't always agree with Alex Jones, but he wrote about this on Prison Planet, and he's totally right on this one.
Right. Yeah, we got the news over here all right about it, and and we've got some emails through the website from people who have a bit of background on it, and they were saying the same things. They were saying it was mind control. Okay. I'm just going to throw a few questions to you, Dave, and then we can go back over certain questions if you want.
How much time do we have, by the way?
Oh, we've plenty of time. We have as much time as you have, really.
Oh, okay. I didn't know what the window was. Okay, great.
Okay, yeah, we've been running for about probably another hour and a half, 2 hours, if that's okay with you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Because I've seen your 2012 Enigma and a few of the shows that you've done, and just you've got such a wealth of information. And Steve with me. Did you say hello, Steve? Say hello, Steve.
Hello, Steve. I did say hello. I did.
And you have loads of information, and we've had people, they knew you were coming on the show before the Christmas, and they were saying, could you ask David this and that then? So we have a lot of questions for you, so if you don't mind, bear with us.
Yeah, fire away.
Okay.
I like variety, so let's go for it.
Yeah, I mean, we have a variety of questions, so really
I do want to talk a little bit about the birds and the fish at some point, but we'll get to that when it's appropriate. So.
Yeah, no problem at all, one of the questions was, obviously we talked about the UFO disclosure and everything else, and this kind of leads into that. What's the current information regarding the Stargate in the Gulf of Aden? Have you got any information on that at all?
My understanding on it is not as extensive as someone like the Project Camelot witnesses who've been interviewed about that recently. I do know that it's in the the southwest quadrant of Iraq, that the area is above ground. I believe that you could actually see it from space if you knew exactly where to look, although I would imagine Google Earth has blocked it out. I know that there is a very, very intense fortification of military vehicles and checkpoints around it. I believe it is the U.S. military, but again, these are military-industrial complex contractors, so it's really kind of an international thing. If you can get through all these military checkpoints and you get to the center one, which one of my colleagues has, what you actually see does look almost exactly like what you see on the television show Stargate SG-1.
Yeah.
It's a big, about 40, 50-foot tall ring. The ring is made of a unique type of metal that is kind of a dark gray that has a lot of glistening, sparkling to it. It's some sort of exotic rare earth mineral that it's made out of. It does have what appear to be obelisks on either side of it. They are as tall as the ring itself, but then they don't have points on them. Those have apparently broken off. The stone that the obelisks are made out of appears to be quite eroded, which is a remarkable contrast to the ring itself, as the ring itself looks really pristine. There is apparently another one that is real that was actually carved in half. It was, if you go back to the story of Moses in the Bible, one of my insiders told me that the story of Moses is the story of ETs coming through the Stargate and oppressing the Egyptian people, that the gods or the rulers of Egypt at that time were not here, they were not human, and this particular gate was how they were getting in and where a lot of this damage was coming from. And so when Moses helped overthrow that ruling elite, part of the story that did not get into the Bible, according to what I was told, is that he actually did destroy the Stargate that they were getting in through, and then buried it. And that Stargate was then carved in, it was unearthed by Black Ops people, carved in half, and the two pieces were then sent where they now reside in Detroit, Michigan, out in the open. There's a sculpture there called Transcendence, and it's this big giant circle in Detroit, and you can go there today, and they've got weird stones sitting around it, and it's right out in the open. I mean, that's the way they like to do it. You know?
Yeah, they put it out there so you can see it, and people won't realize it because we think everything's supposed to be hidden.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, if you're going to make a big sculpture of a ring, why would you cut it in half at the top?
Yeah.
But and that's because they don't want it to actually function. Now, apparently all the teeth that you see on that sculpture, if you go look for it, it's not quite the same as what you see in Stargate, but it's pretty darn close. Those teeth are like points where these rotating pieces that would normally be on the outside will latch into place. And the pieces obviously are not there. But that's part of what they took off so that it wouldn't function properly. But the Stargate, as far as I understand, this is one of a couple different locations in Iraq where there are active natural stargates, and then when you have an active natural stargate, you can use augmentation and certain types of technology in order to make them functional. The technological complexity of getting a stargate to function is rather high, because you have to input a set of coordinates into it, which involves non-physical geometry. You have to use hyperspatial geometry, which is a special type of arithmetic and mathematics and algebra. And in order for us to be able to calculate the hyperspatial algebra, you need computer power that's almost beyond what we have, because it's such an incredible number crunching to do.
Yeah.
What happens is that the ancient Stargate systems have what are called dialers in them, and the dialers are specially made to be able to do these calculations within their own system. They have all the coordinates already loaded. It's already been calculated.
Yeah.
So each planet has a different number. If it's an inhabited planet that has people like us on it, there is a Stargate address. It is, I guess, there's the first 3 digits are single numbers, and then there's 3 sets of double digits that could be 1 to 99, and then the last set is a triple digit. It could be up to 999. Each of those numbers are like sectors of our local area, the galaxy and other galaxies, I guess.
Okay. Do we know who put them there?
Yeah. The insiders refer to them as the ancients, and apparently what happens is that the ancients are all over our galaxy and other galaxies. These gates were designed to facilitate communication and cooperation between planets of inhabited worlds. They put it in before we ever start to grow into sentience, so it's something that we could find. And interestingly enough, that was originally that's what Arthur C. Clarke was writing about in 2001. You notice in 2001 that the monolith shows up in the beginning, right after the cavemen discover how to use tools to kill each other. The guy picks up the bone, and then all of a sudden, bam, there's the monolith. And that's a representation of stuff that was actually leaked to him, from what I've heard. So there are several different types of ancient gate network. The ones that the ancients put on our planet, there is a central network, a central gate that the whole planet works off of, and that's the main jump over point to other planets. So we have quite an extensive interest in this, because you, for example, cannot send anything through the gate unless it's organic, biological. So, like, if you tried to bring a gun through, it's just going to have dematerialized when you get to the other side. But the people here in the U.S. military and other agencies were very concerned about what could happen. And so our ancient gate is actually, or was in the 80s at least, buried in the ice in Antarctica, because they were afraid of anything getting through and causing trouble. But the whole gate system was designed so that it could only be peaceful exploration. It wasn't meant to ever be able to let somebody go through to cause damage.
But then again, we are assuming that these aliens are coming through and they are peaceful. But if they are a few thousand years ahead of us, then they have the power of the mind. They might need weaponry if they were that way inclined. I'm just going to.
Well, I agree. I mean, look, if you have somebody who's got a fully awakened pineal gland, then you have somebody who has the capacity to use what they call spiritual nuclear energy. And that can be, the movies have only started to talk about how intense some people could be in terms of their level of telekinesis and their level of, being able to just fry the synapses in a crowd of 10,000 people's brains in a split second. I mean, that's the kind of power that some people would have if they wanted to use it. So, yeah, there is a legitimate concern. That is true.
And with this, you talked about the Stargate in Iraq and Iran, I think. Would this be in any coincidental that the let's say the American troops or the British troops they want to actually, or the international army will say, they actually want to go in and invade Iran or Iraq. Would this be one of the reasons? Because they know there's a lot of kind of old artifacts and Stargates that are there that they want to get their hands on.
Well, I can only tell you what I've been told.
Yeah.
And what I've been told is that Iraq was effectively for three purposes. The first purpose was to secure the oil fields. The second purpose was to secure a base of operations in the Middle East and to cluster the American army into one small location so that they could be destroyed, and then the United States would be completely defenseless as part of this overall catastrophe scenario that they want to create.
Yeah. And
then number three would be to secure, to deactivate the Stargates because they're worried about a shift that's going to happen in 2012. That if they had intel that told them that these gates will flash over and become overly active and will actually affect the Earth's gravity to such an extent that it would destabilize the Earth on its axis and could be responsible for a pole shift. So what I've heard, is that part of what they were doing was trying to save the Earth from a catastrophe by making sure that all these gates were deactivated. And apparently everybody who had possession of one of these ancient systems, which, I'm not sure how many there are, but I gather there's 40 or 50 or something like that around the world.
Yeah.
Everybody had been willing to shut them down, but Saddam would not, because he was actually having communication. He was using it as a communications tool with extraterrestrials who were helping him, I guess, in some way, and so they felt they needed to shut that down.
Okay, so there's a bigger picture. Well, I'll tell you what, one of the things we'll get to and talk to is 2012, which is on the list. So,
sure.
Again, we'll just go to another question which we have here.
Can I throw this one in?
Yeah, go ahead,
John. The chat facility that we have on the website, David, there's a lot of kind of comments coming in, and there was one that came in much earlier, and I want to go back to it before I actually forget about it, but it was from one of our guests in the UK, and they wrote just a question for Mr. Wilcock when he's there. Could he discuss his views on the power of manifestation of whatever we focus on, i.e. the apocalyptic pessimists such as Jordan Maxwell? Are they almost aiding the negative agendas by encouraging us to focus on a dark future? Would David agree that any degree of predicting or worrying about the future serves only to hinder us in our living in the now?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Steve. That's exactly how I see things, and I do consider Jordan Maxwell to be a friend of mine. We've had a variety of intriguing off-the-record conversations, but you also see me in the Project Camelot Jordan Maxwell interview grilling him about this. Some of that was actually deleted from the video, but there's enough of it that got left in that you can get a sense of what happened. And I used his own story against him, because if you remember in Jordan Maxwell's story, he was contacted when he was a young man by a woman who fell in love with him and then took him to introduce him to her father after they'd had a few dates. And then her father started to talk to him about UFOs, and, this is an ordinary-looking guy, and he said he was very interested in it, and the guy said, well, would you like to see some UFOs tonight? And he said, sure. And they went out into the backyard, and the guy said, okay, there's going to be one that'll come over from, I forget if it was one or if it was three, but there's going to be one that'll come over from the southeast here, and it's going to fly over our head. And just wait for it, it'll be here in a second. And sure enough, as he said this UFO shows up in the air, and the guy starts saying to him, even before they actually saw the saucer fly overhead with all the colors on the bottom, the guy had said, do you remember when you were standing out there on your porch and you were picking at the wood, and then you had this moment of realization where you said such and such to yourself, and it was this kind of realization that you're not alone, and do you remember that? And he said, yeah. And he said, well, we were there listening to you as you did that. We were right there. And he gave a couple examples like this. And so this guy is clearly establishing that they are a benevolent force, that they're listening to him, that they're protecting the planet, that they're not going to let anything bad happen, and that's part of his story. And he almost cries when he tells the story, but then he goes on to be doom and gloom. And I'm like, Jordan, man, your own story. They introduce themselves to you. They stopped doing that after the 60s because they found out that it was pumping up people's ego too much and it was not having a positive benefit. So as far as I know, most of those type of in-person contacts were discontinued, which I think is a shame, but that's the policy that they made. But prior to that point, people were getting contacted by human extraterrestrials. You go back and look at George Adamski's story. There's some great stuff in his stories about that. And I basically, all I can say is that we are dealing with a frequency war on this planet. It is true that whatever you focus on will manifest. Thankfully, the physics is geared in such a way that the people who focus on the positive have exponentially more of an influence on the planet than the people who focus on the negative. And that can be expressed in the so-called Maharishi effect, where 7,000 people were able to reduce global terrorist activity by 72%, which means literally 3 out of 4 people who would pick up a gun didn't do it. 3 out of 4 people who would smack their wife across the face because she looked at them the wrong way didn't do it. 3 out of 4 people who would go and blow up a suitcase bomb didn't do it. And it's because of these people meditating somewhere else. They ruled out every other possible cause of why the terrorism went down, and the only thing that it could be correlated with was these people doing what they did. So for that reason, and for many, many other reasons, I encourage people to look beyond doom and gloom and recognize that what's happening on the Earth right now is an initiation on a collective level. The story of Jesus is a story that's one guy going through initiation and then reaching ascension. And it was meant to be a parable of what the whole planet was going to go through. And the conclusion of the story is the part we haven't reached yet. We're still on the cross right now in our modern version of the story. We haven't reached the ascension point yet. But that's what it's all leading to. So yes, doom and gloom, if you want to think that way, that's fine, but it's an uninformed opinion.
I think one of the things that myself and Steve come across, we went to a show by Jim Core and Enoch Crane. I don't know whether you've heard of them, David, over your side of the water.
I have not.
Yeah, Jim Core is a musician in a well-known band over here in Ireland called the Corrs.
He must know the Corrs.
Yeah, you probably know. I don't know whether you've heard of the Irish band the Corrs.
No, I have not.
No, okay. Well, Jim is a guitarist. It's a family band, basically. And Jim has kind of stepped out from the crowd. And, you know, he's made his money and everything else. He could have easily taken a back seat and not said anything. But he felt... he really felt that he had to come out and say something about what's going on. So he's gone around talking to people about this. And Enoch Crane is an oil executive who's been in the oil business for over 20 years. He was over in Kuwait and everything else when all the Saddam Hussein thing was going on, and Iraq. And basically, Ian said something quite profound. You know, you were talking about positive energy and stuff like that, and they always say a positive thought is 100 times more beneficial than a negative thought. It's more powerful. And yeah. Ian was saying that he went over to the Alps, and there was a tribe of people who lived 16,000 feet up in the Alps, and they ended up there because 25 generations previously they were kind of attacked by the conquistadors. So to get away, they went up very high in the Alps. So 25 generations later, they came down. And Ian said, why did you come down after 25 generations? And they said, they've come down to give mankind a message. And he said, what message is that? He said, 90% of you have to get off the planet because you're not living in harmony with the planet. Now, I've also read...
sounds like the Illuminati.
yeah, kind of. Reducing the eugenics program and reducing the population down to, 500 million. Now, I read a book years and years ago called The Only Planet of Choice. I don't know whether you've read that book.
It's been referred to me in various emails. I have not actually read it.
Yeah, and they actually talk about the change that's going on. You know, we all know about the Aztecs and the Mayans and the I Ching and the Hopi Indians and all the predictions for the planet. And I've read both sides. You get some people who'll say it's a spiritual awakening, and obviously we know that we talked about the photon belt, and you were saying that about the DNA, extra DNA strands, which we're going to get with this change. And then other people say, oh, we're going to have devastation.
Oh, I did not say extra DNA. No, I've never said that.
Oh, right, okay.
I said there will be DNA modification.
DNA modification.
I just wanted to clarify that because I'm not in the 12-strand camp at all.
Okay.
I'm not even in the three-strand camp.
No, that's okay.
Strands are not important. It has a lot more to do with the energy that structures the strands, but we'll get into that.
Yeah. The modification of the DNA, and
right.
So I've kind of, you have your doom and gloom people saying the planet's gone through a change, the north and south poles are going to change, because 15, 23 degrees out of balance, and according to this book anyway, is that the Earth is the one planet that's out of balance, and we have to rebalance, and this photon belt's going to come in, and whatever's going to happen. So one of the things, as you say, is the change in the DNA structure. Do you want to touch base on what your theory is regarding what you might? Well, actually, it was a bit early for 2012, but I suppose we're talking about it. If you want to have, just tell us what your feeling is regarding 2012 and what you feel might happen, because I've read both sides. I really have, and Steve has as well, and I'm still sitting on the fence because, to be honest with you, we don't have a crystal ball, so.
Well, okay, there's several places I can go with that question, but I'm happy to do so. To look at the information about DNA is not to make a theory, actually. I do have theories associated with the facts, but I don't come out with a theory as if that's just another theory. There are scientific realities that are not questionable because they've already been proven, and I'll disclose a couple of those here because I've done so many times. One thing is that we actually know from the most exhaustive collection of fossils ever put together, which are from the ocean, by Rope and Sepkoski, two paleontologists, that there are noticeable peaks in the evolutionary record where you have a sudden emergence of new species worldwide that happens after a long, long period where nothing happens. The more that they looked at this data, the more they came to the inescapable conclusion that there was a repeating pattern to when these events occurred, and the pattern was taking place over roughly 26 million year cycle. The more they did that data and did the research, the more the pattern came out, even though they were trying to get rid of it because they thought it was a problem. And they came to the conclusion that it had to be that way. Then that pattern only went back 250 million years. More recently, two other scientists, Dr. Robert Mueller and Robert Rode, investigated further and found another cycle that goes all the way back to the first single-celled organisms in the ocean 542 million years ago. And that cycle is a 62 million year cycle. Now that 62 million year cycle is very interesting because it actually lines up with precisely 1/4 of the galactic rotation. If you look at many of the calculations of the galaxy's orbit, it's said to be 248 million years. Well, that's 62 million years times 4. So what does that mean? It means that there appears to be some sort of energetic division of the galaxy into quadrants. And as we go into each new quadrant, there's some sort of qualitative change in the available energy. And the available energy I'm referring to here, unfortunately, is not commonly known, but it's something that is measurable in the microwave spectrum. You go back to the astronomy is based on what they call redshift, which is a microwave frequency that they use to determine distance. They believe that certain frequencies indicate something's closer, certain frequencies indicate something's farther away. But there's a big elephant in the room, and that is that within a single galaxy, there's multiple layers of redshift. And it's not like it's a smooth gradient from higher to lower. It's a stepwise change where the highest redshift is in the middle, the lowest redshift is at the edge, and it goes in layers that are evenly spaced and that appear to be drifting away from the center based upon Dr. William Tift's observations of this. And he's a mainstream astronomer who then got in a lot of trouble with people when he came out with this research. So then I point you to Dr. Harold Aston, who has a website, energyscience.co.uk, and he independently came up with a whole series of new equations that are based on the Maxwell equations, and that's what all electromagnetic energy is based off of. All of the radio communications, everything that we use to do electronics is coming off the Maxwell equations. Well, this is also a ridiculous fact that the Maxwell equations postulate there is an ether, that there is this hidden substrate of energy that all physical matter arises from, which scientists are only beginning to start to say might be true when they use terms like dark matter, dark energy, quantum fluid, quantum foam, etc. So that series of equations that Harold Aston came up with included one where he calculated the densities of the quantum medium, or what he was calling the ether. And these densities would show up in the microwave spectrum, and his equations cranked out what the numbers would be down to many, many decimal points of accuracy. When he looked at the data that William Tift had observationally gathered in these various galaxies, of which there have been hundreds now that have been surveyed, and every time they look at a galaxy, they find these layers in the galaxy. The microwave frequencies that Tift discovered are correct down to 5 decimal points of accuracy with the theoretical calculations in Aston's equations. What does that mean? Why does that matter? Aston's equations, his supposition is that these different layers of quantum energy literally correspond to planes of existence that are separate partitioned realities you can live in. And it appears that these zones are drifting away from the center of the galaxy, that they then engulf the solar system with a new wave of energy. As they do so, they induce, in my model, interplanetary climate change. We know that when the dinosaurs went extinct, this is the last time that there was a major wave of this energy coming in, 62 million years ago. In fact, we're a little bit overdue because the dinosaurs are believed to have been 65 million years ago is when they went extinct. Well, that could be because there was a sudden surge in the amount of energy coming in that then showed an increase in carbon-14 radiation. So it could actually be 62 million years ago. But the point is that we are we are now in the biggest mass extinction since the dinosaurs, which appears to be energetically triggered. And it appears that the interplanetary climate change we're seeing is part of this effect of this galactic energy coming in. And in my model, I also have the actual proof that you can change one species to another on the embryonic level. You bombard an embryo with energy that's from a laser beam shined through another species, and that species will actually transform.
That's right. I think you did it with a frog and a salamander or something.
Yeah, and there's also a guy named Luigi Ighina, Ighina, an Italian scientist who independently discovered the same thing and was actually able to zap a rat with the energy from a cat, and the rat ended up growing a cat's tail, and then it died. But so it's not like Gariev is the only scientist who's done this. There's several new examples I bring out in my new book that I just finished writing 2 days ago.
Okay, do you want to just tell us the name of the book, David, for our listeners?
The book is called The Source Field Investigations, and the source field is the term I use for the ether because it's the source of matter, the source of energy, the source of space, the source of time, the source of biology, and the source of consciousness. And so even though this energy is enfolded into the gravitational field, and you could say it's the energy of gravity, most people have such a preconception about what gravity is that's not going to help them to call it gravity. So that's why I use the term the source field.
Okay, where does that lead us regarding 2012? Because I watched your 2012 Enigma, and with fantastic interest, because you did talk about, Jodie Foster and the contact, and you have the technology in the last Mimsy, and you said that they have time travel technology, and they've done it, but they've got as far as going to 2012, and then something happens after that. I'm just trying to remember what your comments were regarding it, but they wanted to try and make changes, but they couldn't, because as soon as they hit the 2012 barrier, they couldn't do anything after that for some reason. If you could...
let me get into that and just finish what I was saying, because I forgot to mention one thing.
Okay.
And that is that if you look at evolution in terms of humans and in terms of DNA evidence, we know that in the last 5,000 years, our human evolution has increased by 100 times faster. So that's a documented fact. So there's no question that we're evolving. The Flynn effect is where they're having to change IQ scores by 3 points per decade, which means a person considered a genius 100 years ago would now be below average intellect today. That's all also scientifically proven. As far as the time situation, that opens up a whole other discussion, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. Basically, my understanding is that we coexist with a parallel reality. The entire universe that we see, even though we see 3 dimensions and we appear to think that those 3 dimensions are relatively stable, it's only half of the story. There are 3 real dimensions in the universe, according to Dr. Dewey Larson. But those 3 real dimensions are the place where space and time interpenetrate one another like fluids that are flowing from a high pressure to a low pressure, back to a high pressure, back to a low pressure. There's energy that is constantly flowing between space and time. And it has 2 major phases that it goes into, that it's flowing back and forth through. Our 3-dimensional universe is half of where that flow is going. Like there's an hourglass and the other half is flowing into that, and we don't see that. So magnetars, nucleon stars, black holes, etc., represent astrophysical objects in which there is a great deal of flux from our reality going into this parallel reality and back out. But then there are much smaller flows going on at the quantum level within every atom. The atomic structure is only able to exist because of this flow between 2 realities, and one of the ways you can see that is wave-particle duality. We see what appears to be a solid particle one moment, and then it becomes non-local, and they call it a wave. But the non-locality, if you actually read the books, it says that it's non-local in space and non-local in time. And so their own data of the quantum physicist says that this is a particle that now exists in the past, present, and future at the same time. And that's what's going on. In this parallel reality, very important point, it's not like they're identical. The parallel reality is different. It's a parallel reality in which you have all these different coexisting potential realities that you can flip through. It's not like there's only one. It's not like there's only either here or there and that's it. The here, the space that we're in, apparently is, in a sense, more solid. And if you have a physical object in our reality, it will now reflect into many, many, many parallel realities in this alternate side of the universe that you can go to. And that means there's all these different layers you could go into that would have that physical object in it in some form. In the Black Ops program, they actually recovered crashed UFOs. They took the seed out, and they tried to get it powered up and operational. That process was the Phoenix Project. It had 3 phases. Phoenix 3 began on January 1981. All the people that had gotten the seat operational prior to that point, most of them were fired. The personnel were let go. And then new personnel were brought in who did not know the history, and that's typical of compartmentalized programs. I know someone who was brought in to work on it at that time, and he gave me an extensive amount of information. This was a program that they now refer to in pop culture as Montauk. I read the books for years and didn't think it was true, but then when I met somebody who worked there, I became convinced that it was true.
So, just to touch base, this is what we're talking about. If people have seen the movie Contact with Jodie Foster, basically you're saying it's similar technology.
Yeah, it was a chair that there was a person that sat in the chair, and they'd be able to tune the chair to the person's own psychic ability. When the person thought of a particular place, then there was actually a wormhole that would open up, a traversable wormhole that would take you to that place. And apparently we all do this to some degree, but normally that wormhole only shows up in our pineal gland, and it gives us a little psychic image of where we would be going. But then if you amplify somebody's psychic ability, the pineal gland is now powerful enough to create that wormhole in the lab, and you can send people through it. You can't obviously send somebody through a pea-sized part of your brain, but if you widen it and you make it much more powerful, then you can. So my understanding is that when they did this, there was a massive surge of energy that was created on August 13th, 1983, that was the result of wave coupling with a 20-year cycle, and it then coupled with the Philadelphia experiment in 1943. And that was exactly 40 years after that they jumped onto the same energy. Because remember, the U.S. military never does anything quietly or subtly. You can actually create a wormhole with 3 9-volt batteries if you know how to pulse them properly to create the proper resonance. So it doesn't take a lot of energy. But when the U.S. military did it the first time, they used a tremendous, tremendous amount of energy, and they created a massive problem, which is called a rift. You have to remember that, from the perspective of time is cyclical. So if you create a massive rift of energy, and then you can imagine now there's actually this layer inside the Earth that's a sphere of geometry inside the mantle. The geometry is a frequency, basically, and the sphere is rotating. Let's say there's a rotating sphere inside the Earth. It takes 20 years to rotate. After 20 years, it's now back in the same position that it was in before when the incident happened. And it now will allow the energy from that incident to bleed through once again. So you get this bleed through, and then the rift opens up again, and they used that in the program because the people who were running the program felt that these guys were getting too powerful. And one of the things they could do with the chair is manifest objects or even living things. And so they ended up manifesting a monster that destroyed the whole base. The guy that I know wasn't at work that day. He was called and told never to come back. And so as a result, he also did not get deprogrammed. But that monster was manifested by the power of the chair and the 20-year rift that they had. That event, apparently, when they did that, and they accented the energy from the rift once again, they pumped even more energy into it and made it even more of a problem. And what I've heard now, and I've heard this from separate independent sources who are very credible, is that at that time, they actually created a damaging split to the Earth as a whole. There was very significant damage to the Earth's energy fields caused by this incident. And that damage has now led to what they call Timeline 1 and Timeline 2, 2 separate timelines that we leapfrog back and forth through. As a result of this, any use of chronovising technology, chronovision is where you see through time. Any chronovision involves a flip-flopping between these two realities. We have actually broken time continuum to some degree so that whenever they try to use devices that have chronovision capability, they see two realities. And those two realities get closer and closer together. It's like a flicker frequency between the two. And that flicker frequency is so fast that you have to actually use banks of computers to render out the images to be able to know what you're looking at. So it's become very difficult for them to see into the future with these technologies. And I think the ETs allowed that to happen, frankly, because it's made them weaker. They can't react in real time to what they're seeing. They have to just ask a question and then gain the data and then render it out on these server farms. It takes a long, long time. But the trick is that as you go towards 2012, and it's December 21st, 2012 on the timeline, these two images, the flicker frequency between them becomes so fast that you cannot actually deinterlace them. The frame the frame rate of the film that they're using, the high-speed film, is not fast enough to render out the two different images, and so therefore they cannot see past 2012. And it's like it all basically goes to white light. Now, they have been able to apparently send people into the future past 2012 using this portal technology. But each team reports different things. There doesn't appear to be any consistency in the viewing of the future past 2012. So my conclusion is that there's some sort of nexus point in the time fabric, and even though they have the ability to access time up until 2012 to some degree, and there's two major timelines with a bunch of branches off of that, something like 70 or 80 different branches that I've heard. After that point of 2012, you cannot see anything. And if you try to go out there, then you're just going to have a completely random reality based on what the person who goes out there expects that they're going to see.
And why are they going forward just to see what's going to happen and what the planet's going to be like, or is there more sinister reasons why they're doing it?
Why did Eve pick the apple? Why did Adam eat the apple that Eve handed him? I mean, this is the level of temptation we're talking about here. In fact, the Adam and Eve story is part of that. The forbidden fruit is, to some degree, the ability to access this non-physical reality, and it is addictive. Why wouldn't you want to look through time? Look at the advantage that you have if you can strategize and you know what the economy is going to do and you know what people are going to do and you have plans. And to some degree, they also try to manipulate the future and they try to send energy. Part of the technology I've heard is that they actually will look at a certain particular reality of which there's always going to be a melange of different choices in the future. They'll look at one reality, which is probably not very strong on the list of probabilities of what will actually transpire, and then they try to use certain devices to actually send energy to those particular timelines to try to strengthen them and make them more likely to manifest. That's all theoretical research, and apparently it doesn't work very well, but they've at least tried to do that.
So they basically have more capabilities and power than brains, basically. They're playing with things they shouldn't be playing with, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sounds like Atlantis to me all over again. All the power, but not the brains. I think Steve has.
Well, it's the same government that reincarnated, and we're working out the karma, and hopefully they're not going to be able to destroy the planet this time. In fact, I know they won't be able to because they're not going to be allowed to.
Well,
But it's the same guys. You're exactly right.
Yeah. And basically, before we flick over to Steve. As I say, there's different theories on what people think. Some people say it's a spiritual awakening. Other people say we're going to have devastation on the planet because the poles are going to change and da-di-da. What's, based on the information that you know, what's your take on what you feel might be? Is it going to be just a spiritual awakening, or are there going to be changes on the planet where we're all going to be affected in some way?
There is some sort of energy shift that will happen. All of the interplanetary climate change that we're seeing now that's ramping up and the weather changes is all part of that. My understanding is that there will be some sort of solar event, and it apparently is more like a white light thing rather than something like a solar flare or a coronal mass ejection. I do not believe that the white light actually destroys anything, but it's referred to extensively in the Mahabharata, the Hindu sacred text, as what they call the Samavartaka fire, and they describe it extensively. They talk about it as having a sparkling quality, and that it's this brilliant white light, and it appears to also exist in the Christian metaphors of when it says, "As the light shines from the east to the west, so too shall the coming of the Son of Man be." All this seems to derive from a primordial civilization before the flood that was at war with Atlantis. It was called Rama. And if you read Plato's account of Atlantis, it says that Atlantis was at war with another big civilization.
Yeah.
That civilization, the cleanest record of that civilization became Zoroastrianism. And it branched off from Siberia. After the poles shifted, the glaciers came in, they had to move out. Half of them went to Iran and half of them went to India. more or less, and that's the Aryan race. It's not white people, actually. And Zoroastrianism is the more, in my view, it's got more specific technical detail from the civilization than Hinduism, although Hinduism has a tremendous amount. Zoroastrian scripture has a lot of pieces that Hindus don't. And one of the things it has is they describe this time as what they call Phroso-Kererti. And there's a lot of stuff on Phroso-Kererti, and it does also describe this massive change. But interestingly enough, it says that the negative will not be defeated all at once, and it's going to be gradually, progressively weakened and eventually just kind of run out of gas. And it also does not say that we're going to go through a massive cataclysm. It says there will be this change, and it gives its own version of the sparkling white light. But that's part of what apparently we're heading into here. So the people that are working in these classified programs do believe that there could be possible calamities because they know that the cycle that's causing this is a cycle that they believe is related to why Atlantis sank. And I actually don't think that's true. I think that Atlantis sank because there was nuclear weapons used in a war between the Rama faction, which is now India and Iran, and the Atlanteans. And the Atlanteans were nuked by the Ramans. In fact, that nuclear explosion is described in the Mahabharata. And that nuclear catastrophe is what actually caused the Earth's poles to shift, not the harmony of the cycle. The cycle is not intended to kill us. And people who think that way just haven't done enough research. But that's also why I keep spreading this message, because once you have the facts, again, doom and gloom is simply uninformed. It just doesn't hold up under the evidence.
Well, there's no point. I think, to a certain extent, we can't, there's a lot, none of us can really do anything about it. We have noticed ourselves here just in Ireland and in Europe that we've had weather conditions that we've never had before, or since, the recording of certain temperatures and weather patterns and weather conditions we've experienced. I mean, even just before Christmas, we had like 4 weeks of snow and ice, and for that to be in Ireland, I don't remember a time in the UK or in Ireland when we had 4 weeks continually, and then we've had a few days break, and then we're back in snow again. And this, I mean, obviously around the world weather conditions are changing and people are experiencing things as well, but it just seems that there are changes taking place big time. But what I'll do, Dave, I'll pass over to Steve. Steve has a few questions for you from our listeners.
Okay.
Right, here we go. First of all, I have more of a comment. This is a comment from me, and then I have 2 questions from a listener called Alex. My comment, David, is in relation to the pineal gland. Now, this is just basically from research that I've seen. In relation to fluoride, water fluoridation. I mean, over here in Ireland, the water, it's fluoridated and has been since 1964, I think. I'm not 100% sure. But research seems to prove that the fluoride over time does calcify and damage the pineal gland. So when this awakening happens, and if it has anything to do with our pineal glands, it seems that powers that be are making sure that pineal glands are damaged, and people obviously won't be able to use them for whatever future purpose they may serve. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Just before I
well, in my new book, Source Field Investigations, I have done some really remarkable research, and it only happened over Christmas. I was not originally writing about the pineal gland. The producer urged me to do something about it. I did more research than where I had been when I did the 2012 Enigma video, and I was very, very pleased by what I found. I have now extensive medical proof that the pineal gland is just like a retina. There are these cells inside of it called pinealocytes that are basically the same as the rods and cones in the eye on multiple levels. They have the same proteins. There's also the wiring of the pineal gland has what they refer to as a phototransduction cascade to the brain, which is identical, basically, more or less, to the phototransduction cascade between the retina and the brain. So the pineal gland is wired just like the eye to the brain. It has receptors just like the eye inside of it. And then these scientists actually go so far as to say, this suggests the possibility that direct photic, P-H-O-T-I-C, direct photic events may occur inside the pineal gland. Well, what they mean is photons being released and detected by these retinal cells. They don't know where the photons are coming from. However, other scientists have discovered that there are floating, what they call microcrystals in the pineal gland, primarily made out of calcite, which is a similar compound as what's in quartz crystals. And that these little microcrystals actually are piezoelectric. Piezoelectricity means, like a crystal radio, if you have the crystal sitting there, it can be picking up radio stations without using electricity, because as electromagnetic energy moves through space, the crystal is vibrating on a certain frequency. When you have a dial on the radio and you crank up the dial, the old version of that is that you're literally putting pressure on the crystal. And as you put more pressure on the crystal, it changes its receptivity to these electromagnetic energy fields, which in turn tunes the radio station. In addition to piezoelectricity, you also have piezoluminosity. Piezoluminosity means that piezoelectric crystals can, in many cases, release photons as they expand and contract. And then I also found there's also piezochromatism. Piezochromatic crystals actually will release different colored photons at different times, depending on the frequency that's coming in. So you have the potential for a full-color holographic projection system. Then you have the rods, the pinealocytes, as I said, the phototransduction cascade. All the equipment is there. I believe that the way the pineal gland works is it's holographic. So that means it's redundant. That means you can have a very small area left, and you'll still be able to get some value out of it. So it is true that there does appear to be a deliberate a deliberate effort in place to try to get people's pineal glands to calcify. Fluoride is one of a series of compounds that will calcify the pineal gland, the halides, which includes chlorine as well. All these different chemicals do have that calcifying effect because they bind to these little floating crystals and actually gum them up. So what we then deal with is there does appear to be a reason behind this for why it's being done. However, it's very important to note that the pineal gland, while it is a powerful organ, it's not like if you have calcification in your pineal gland that you will not be able to go through the ascension. The ascension is apparently going to be something that occurs on a cellular and DNA level within every cell, and not just in the pineal gland.
Just touching base on when you say the ascension, are we talking like a physical or a spiritual change here?
Well, nobody really knows the answer to that. I do think that every person will experience a change to some degree when we go through this. And I think that once we have experienced that level of change, that some people will then be able to use that as a springboard to actually transmute into a light body. So I think everybody's going to go through an energetic change, but we all go through it at the same time. And then if you're ready, you can have that light body, which is basically the next level of human evolution. And it doesn't necessarily mean everybody who's ready for that light body will have it happen all at once either. I think that after 2012, we're going to start to have open communication with extraterrestrials. I don't think there's going to be a cover-up anymore. I think part of this energetic shift that happens will, to a large degree, open up some dormant centers of consciousness that right now, it's like a hypnotic suggestion. You can give somebody hypnosis and then they can be walking around and they appear to be fully conscious, but you can give them instructions and then they'll follow those instructions, including not being able to see someone who's standing right in front of them. You can tell them in hypnosis, you will not be able to see your daughter. This guy comes out of hypnosis and his daughter is right in front of him and he can't even see her. He can look right through her body and read things on the other side of her body as if she wasn't there. So I believe that we have a hypnotic suggestion like that. And that's why, like, synchronicity happens. You can look at the clock when you haven't looked at it in 3 hours and it says 11:11. Well, wow, what's that? That's because some party was under hypnosis and you're being told to look, and you don't know that the hypnosis is there. I think that hypnotic suggestion extends into consciousness so that we don't remember that we have a past life or multiple past lives. although Dr. Ian Stevenson did research with 3,000 children in the Middle East and found that they recalled very accurate details of their past lives, it could be verified. And they actually looked like the people they said they had been before. Forensically, there was a great match. So I think that what will happen after 2012 is that there's going to be some sort of mass amnesia that gets switched off. We remember a lot more than we do now. I think that the kind of information I'm giving people and other people like me are giving people is a preparatory process that will help you get ready for this so it's not as jarring when it happens. Okay. But I think once that event happens, it will be a lot easier for people to be psychic, it will be a lot easier for people to use telekinesis, and you will now have the capability to be ready to ascend if you have been through enough spiritual learning to be prepared for that. I don't think it all happens at once. I think people will be ascending on an ongoing basis after this happens, based on their training and based on their ambition and their willingness and desire to want to do that, which you don't have to do. So that's my current thinking on the subject. It's an evolving investigation, and I have to work new information in as I see it. So that's where my thinking is right now.
Okay. Steve, you have another question for Dave?
Yeah, the question now, David, from Alex is... well, it's two questions. I'll throw both of them at you, and then you can take it in whichever one you want to go with first. Question one was: can you ask David what he knows about the 9/11 Black Op? And question two: can you ask David if he knows the Australian? I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong. George Cavasillas. I think that's I'm not 100% sure.
Cavasillas or something.
Is it George Cavasillas? And what he thinks about his UFO research.
Okay. I've had people email me about George Cavasillas. I haven't had time to look into what he's doing, so I don't really know anything about it. I can't really say one way or the other what my opinion is because I don't have one.
Okay.
But a lot of people are interested in him. I definitely know that. I mean, we get a lot of email about that. So, some people have told me that I'd really benefit from watching his videos, and there'd be a lot of things in there that I could potentially use. I don't really know if he's doing channeling or if he's doing research. That's not been made clear. I try to veer away from channeling because I find that people don't really have the training to be able to do it properly. That's why I just released a new video, Access Your Higher Self. In fact, the professional version of that will probably going to be debuting tonight or tomorrow in West Coast time here at least. And that's something where I've now given all of the instructions that I have to share with people about how to do this. And I wouldn't have done that before because I thought that the potential for somebody to misuse the ability to channel is there. But I think we're close enough to the end of the cycle now that it's okay to release this information despite its potential power in the hands of anyone who uses it. And I try to make clear that I want it to be used for ethical purposes and not to become delusional and not to channel yourself into the world messiah, which a lot of people do. It's a common mistake that people don't realize that this is a planetary team initiative and it's not hinging on one person. So getting back to 9/11, that's a very complex subject. It's a subject that I researched for many, many years when it first happened, because I was into all the conspiracy media before it happened. I had extensive prophetic information that was predicting that something like this would happen, and that information said that it was an inside job. In fact, back in 1996, I had very provocative quotes that came through. In December 1996, after I'd had my own car crash and the beings had predicted when I would crash, the exact time, the day, and even the fact that I would be handed a 3.5 by 11 sheet of paper, which turned out to be the ticket that the officer wrote me, that same set of readings predicted 9/11. And it said, somebody comes in, rescue 911. He likes to do that. It's the greatest science fiction story ever told. And that was an interesting line because it suggested that the entire official story about 9/11 would be fictional, science fiction. And, of course, the whole idea that buildings could fall, that they're made out of such incredibly reinforced steel pylons, it's ludicrous, obviously. And the Building 7 is another. There's many, many, many layers. And, Honestly, in my opinion, 9/11 has been beat to death. It's so obvious that it was an inside job that I don't really need to say anything more. If you don't believe it, then you just haven't done your homework.
I'll have to agree with you that, and David, I've kind of left 9/11 to a while back because I've done so much research into it that, as you say, it's blatantly obvious that it was an inside job, and if people haven't done the homework, then, sometimes living in ignorance for some people is the best thing,
Well, it comes out of fear. I mean, let's be clear on that. The reason why people don't want to believe it is not because the evidence isn't there. It's because we have what I call the sheep effect. The sheep effect is where we actually consciously overlook evidence because we were taught in the animal kingdom that if you look at the wolf, then the wolf attacks you. If you ignore the wolf, then the wolf doesn't think his cover's been blown yet, and he can continue to walk around the outside of the herd and do what he wants to do, and he's not going to be spotted. So there appears to be that deliberate intention that we have that, okay, well, if I don't look at this and I don't look at the scary thing, then it won't attack me. And that's like an instinctive response, and many, many movies are made to use the sheep effect where, like, for example, the murderer is stalking someone, and they hide under the bed, and they don't want to look, but then for whatever reason, they think maybe he's gone, and they start to relax a little bit, and they get a little bit confident, and I gotta look, and as soon as they look, there's teeth, and there's blood, and there's, they're being cut open, and that's all stuff that's being deliberately done, in my view, from what I've heard, from the Pentagon, who is financing these movies behind the scenes, to keep teaching us, like Pavlovian and conditioning. Yeah. If you look at the monster will kill you.
Yeah.
So people are being mind controlled and they don't realize.
Oh yeah, big time. I'll tell you what, Dave, what we're going to do is we're going to go to a bit of a musical break just so we can get a bit of water for yourself to give yourself a rest there as well. This
okay, great.
This a band. You actually, I don't know whether you know this chap. It's a band called Extraterrestrial UK, and the chap's name is Alan, and he's familiar with your work. He loves your work, him and his partner, and he knows Bill and Kerry from the project Camelot and Avalon. And he's a songwriter and musician, and this is one of the songs that he sent over to me. He asked me to pop it on for you to have a listen as well. It's called Lizards in the Bathtub, so it's probably quite appropriate to what we're talking about. So we'll go into the musical break, and we'll talk to you after on the far side.
Okay, great.
There you go, that's Lizards in the Bathtub by a band called Extraterrestrial UK. David, just touching base on a few more questions we had from listeners.
Sure.
One of the things that we have here, the question is, obviously somebody's seen the 2012 Enigma program documentary that you did. Now we have on Channel 200 on the Sky TV over here in Europe, we have a TV program called, it's Controversial TV. And the TV station is, I think it's EMTV. And they had an English chap on talking about the moon landing. And obviously there's a couple of programs on the internet saying, did man go to the moon and everything else? And they're saying, if you look at the photographs, and there's a lot of anomalies and things, they're saying that they didn't. Now, one of the things that you said on your 2012 Enigma documentary was that man did go to the moon, but they used alien technology to get there. Do you want to kind of elaborate on that and just explain, expand on that and just, talk about how they did it? Because obviously there's people over who've obviously seen these programs called, Did Man Go to the Moon? And there's a kind of a big kind of, I won't say movement, but there's a lot of people believing that they didn't go to the moon, where your kind of argument was on the other side. So can you kind of expand on that?
Well, I've had some very good insider testimony on this particular subject, and some of this I haven't actually gone into full detail about in public yet, but you got to remember, with the U.S. government, this was a battle against the Soviet Union, while actually both countries had very significantly advanced black ops technology, like reverse-engineered spaceships that could fly wherever they wanted. So they obviously could have gone to the moon, but the question was, could they do it within conventional technology or not? And nobody really knew. So the U.S. government set up a contingency plan so that in the event that the astronauts burned up in space and died, or they had some problem that made it so they couldn't get there, that they could fake the entire process and fake the landing and have the American people have their moment of pride and be the first ones to land on the moon and win the race, even if it didn't actually work. And then maybe what they would do is say that they died on the way back or create a cover story. But they did create elaborate sets, apparently with the help of Stanley Kubrick, and those sets mimicked what the moon would look like. Another problem that I heard they had was that the radiation factor was so high in terms of going through space that the film would get totally exposed and whited out. So the American people wanted to see footage from the moon, so in some cases they were using this set, this studio, to give what looked like film from the moon. But there also were trips to the moon as well. So it's a combination of real stuff and fake stuff. Is that the full extent of what you asked me? I can't remember if there was more there.
Yeah, no, I think basically the issue that people were referring to with this was that we know there's a radiation belt around the Earth called the Van Allen belt, which is about 500 miles high. And right. I think the general consensus is that the astronauts, they did take off. They stayed in orbit for a few days. The pre-recorded material was actually put out on the television because the technology that they had at the time for broadcasting was actually better than what they put out, which is another question mark. And then obviously they stayed up there for a few days and then they come back down as heroes, and then that's how the war was won, because we were talking about a Cold War. And I believe they went up in June 1969. 5 or 6 months before the end of the decade, which is what Kennedy announced. So it's just really uncanny that the timing was perfect just before the decade. I mean, all these kind of little things have to be put together. But no, that's fine, because it leads on to another kind of question, and I don't know whether...
Can I just just while we're on the subject, before we maybe go off subject, I would believe that man did go to the moon, but not by the methods that we were shown on TV in the 1960s. I mean, as David is saying about various different forms of travel like Stargates, I'd say they probably did go to the moon via a Stargate, but definitely I don't think that they went in a rocket in the early or the 60s.
No,
definitely not.
Well, if the radiation, the Van Allen belt was, you needed a hole or whatever, 16 inches thick or whatever to avoid the radiation, then it wouldn't have made sense them going through it. And I think there's a lot of interviews with the astronauts who are actually saying that one is contradicting the other.
Correct. Yeah.
And so obviously something did happen anyway, but. One of the things which you're touching base on regarding the moon, and I don't know whether, David, you've seen this program or heard about it, but there was a program on Yorkshire television years ago in the 70s called Alternative 3.
Sure.
And the second time I heard about this was a chap called William Cooper, which you probably know about, who William Cooper talked about alternative plans 1, 2, and 3. What's your take on that?
Alternative 3 was based on some true information. As far as I know, most of it is fairly accurate. In fact, there were some people who got really upset by that. I believe that I seem to remember that the astronaut that they described in the show and in the book was the name was changed, and the real guy was not used. They used an actor, but the astronaut stuff is true. And for those listeners who don't know what Alternative 3 is. It apparently represents a plan that was devised by the world elites to try to survive what they saw as a coming catastrophe on Earth. Alternative 1 was to punch a hole through the Earth's atmosphere to try to let the heat out, and that would be one way to possibly try to solve global warming, and they concluded that was ridiculous and it would destroy the planet. Alternative 2 was to bury into the ground of the Earth and create underground bases so that they can ride it out and the people on the surface whatever happens to them happens to them. That obviously has been done, and it's been done quite extensively. Alternative 3 was to migrate off-world to places like bases on the moon and bases on Mars as a failsafe, and that also has been pursued and done. So basically the only one of the 3 alternatives that wasn't used was popping a hole in the atmosphere.
Which they have the technology, the hard technology to do anyway, based on Tesla and his inventions that Tesla came up with.
Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of weird stuff in that book, including the fact that they were using a technology to over-resonate people's DNA with a certain type of frequency, and then when that happened, the person would burst into flame, and it's called spontaneous human combustion. And then they called it a hot job, and they found out that people were they were worried not so much about common people, but about governments starting to think that this was a technology and not just a random event. And so they basically stopped using that as a method to assassinate people because it was too dramatic, and the media was becoming too interested in it. And the anomalies that would happen when they did that were too strong for them to keep doing it.
Okay, so and throughout history, I can understand, certain people who are, letting information out to the general public being assassinated using that method. But we also know throughout history, people have internally combusted, and it could have been anti-June down the road or something. I know throughout history, there's been innocent people who have nothing got to do with the black ops or the government who have combusted for some reason. So there must be a natural phenomenon going on there, as well as the DNA scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I could speculate without really knowing the answer, but I could speculate, for example, that you could have a supernova that goes off nearby, and perhaps that supernova has a certain frequency, and if that frequency couples with somebody's DNA, then yeah, you might end up having an unfortunate event like that happen. It's possible.
Yeah. And this is the wave, what you're talking about, the wave again, because we all work on a frequency. One of the things that myself and Steve have been looking into recently was the Royal Raymond Rife and his cure for cancer using frequency generators, and also Dr. Bob Beck and his blood electrifier. And these are technologies. We do have a guest on at the end of January who cured herself of cancer using natural remedies, and we will be talking to her about that, because that's another part, the health, to educate people about the health, and the technology that's out there to actually have the ability to basically cure yourself, that you don't have to rely on the pharmaceutical companies and use their drugs. And the whole process and that. But that's another subject matter. I've got one I sent you over. I don't know whether you got it, David. I sent you a photo of we have in the centre of Dublin, in the city centre, we have a spire. Excuse me. And I sent you over a photo on the email. I don't know whether you've seen it. And I know in my research we've come across about using spires to actually focus energy, whether it's good or bad. Now, we have this massive spire in the centre of Dublin, and it doesn't, for me, I think it cost the city $4 million, and it's modern art, okay? And we call it, does people have nicknames? Some people call it the stiletto in the ghetto, or the spike in the dike. These are all affectionate nicknames. But this spire doesn't do anything, it just sits there. And I used to live in London, and I lived in London for a long time, and I used to see a lot of these spire-shaped objects around London. And there is talk about the focusing, like pyramids, using energy, the focusing of energy to control or send out, energy from these things. And that's why I sent you over the photo, just to kind of to see what you think about that. I mean, have you done any research on this focusing of energy using spire-shaped objects like that?
Absolutely, quite extensively, and if you guys have been following my work, you'll know that. So, the way that this works is that every atom is being fed by a fluid-like energy that's not within our reality, but nonetheless exists. And within its own level of existence, it behaves like a fluid, and all the laws of fluid dynamics apply. There's some very interesting theoretical things that happen from that. For example, the Earth is being fed by this fluid-like energy, and that is what we call gravity. So gravity is this river of energy streaming into the Earth to make the Earth exist. And we're getting caught up in the river as it flows down into the Earth. Because it is a fluid, it also has torque, and that means spin. It has a spin current in the flow of the fluid, so it doesn't just go straight down. And the shape of a particular object determines how the energy flows into it. In other words, the flow is not simply a quantum event that occurs inside the atom and is sealed away from every other atom. The overall shape of an object determines the overall flow of energy into it and back out of it. So if you have a sphere, then that means the energy is going to flow in and out the same way. But if you have something like, let's say, a pipe or a cylinder, then obviously it's going to flow in much more through the poles than it will from the sides based on the structure. So by this same logic, if you build something in the shape of a funnel, then you now can create a fluid-like energy conduit similar to a whirlpool that flows through the center, because you're now building something just like a funnel for this fluid-like energy. That's the ancient technology. It's used for a variety of purposes. The Russians have built pyramids and found remarkable healing effects from them. They've been able to cure all diseases. They've been able to make virus-fighting compounds 1,000% more powerful. You name it. There's astonishing things that have been done, including healing the Earth. They can close up the ozone holes, deflect severe weather, reduce earthquakes, and all that stuff seems to be because the real cause of these weather problems is these fluid-like gravitational currents in the atmosphere, and we actually have control over those currents. And the problems with earthquakes and volcanoes is because the continental plates are floating on the mantle, and the mantle in turn is being churned and driven by these spiraling currents that we have control over in our consciousness. So when the Earth goes through Earth changes, it's not just a random event, it's not just the result of changes in the solar system, it's actually our consciousness that's reflecting that. And when too many people in a given area have a lower consciousness, it will make that area vulnerable to Earth changes. So Aspire, or whatever they built there in Dublin, is a classic example of a technology that is in part being used to try to deflect those catastrophes from happening. So in one sense, it does have a purpose, and they do know what that purpose is behind the scenes. So it's not a completely useless object.
True, and my guess is, and this is purely a guess, but the location of it being, chances are it might be on a ley line, I don't know.
Very likely, very likely. Many cities are built on the ley lines for that reason, because it does have energetic qualities that make it healthier and more inspiring to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for me, that makes sense with I've kind of understand from that side. And the question has always bugged me as to why they put this in the center in the city center. It doesn't serve any purpose. But yeah, it's there, and it's massive. I don't know how tall it is. Do you know how tall it is?
It's a couple of 100 feet tall.
Oh yeah, easy.
It actually looks to me like a massive antenna. Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely, I've seen them, living in London and working in London City, I've seen variations of that, small ones, big ones, all around London. And whether good or bad, I'm not too sure on the energy. Well, there you go, David. They're all the questions that we've had in. Mixture of airs, a mixture of listeners who wanted to ask you some of these questions. And we're just coming to the end of the show, but we will say that it's been fantastic having you on. You're mindful of information, and we always know a good show because time just flies by, and it just feels like 5 minutes, but we know it's been longer. It's just the information's fantastic. We will, we'd love to have you on again if you'd like to come on again, and we'll get an update on what you're doing, and if there's anything else that you want to tell us what you're doing, that'd be fantastic. We do have a section on our website for you there. We have 2012 Enigma on there, but if there's anything else that you want us to put on there that you feel is relevant, the the show that you talked about, the Illuminati, and these guys going around doing what they're doing, I'll have to try and track that down and put it up there and let people make up their own mind. Obviously, you don't have to, they'll have their opinion based on what they hear as well.
Sure.
But I thought it was very good what you were talking about and what you said, because we all know the main thing is we have a big truth agenda on over here in the Sovereign Independent, which is the Irish newspaper. The guys at the Sovereign Independent newspaper are fantastic. They're doing a fantastic job. They're getting loads of information out there all about what's going on. And we have a truth agenda that's coming out on January the 22nd of this month. And we have people like Lord Christopher Monton, F. William Mendall, Scott C. Tips, Ian Crane, Jim Core, Dave Darby. These are all the guys going to be talking about, the bigger picture and what's going on. So we recommend everybody being there. I don't know, have you been over here, David, at all? Have you done any tours over here in Ireland and Europe?
I have been to London twice. I have not been to other countries in Europe yet.
Okay.
But I'm certainly open to it.
Okay, that's brilliant. So that's something that we might we'll pass on to the lads at the Solvindo and maybe have a talk with them and see what we can do, because I think there's a number of great speakers, you included, that obviously haven't come over here. And we know Ireland's only a small island compared to the States, but the amount of awakening that's going on in Ireland is phenomenal. More and more people are opening up and asking questions, and we are really going through a bad time at the moment with the IMF coming in from Europe. The country is in a really bad state, but people are beginning to wake up and question it and ask what's going on. And it's just, great getting different perspectives from people. So, we'd just say thanks again for coming on the show. And
thank you.
Steve, if you want to...
Well, 397.6 feet. I just checked it. That's the height. That's the height of the spire.
Oh my God, that's almost as tall as the Great Pyramid, because the Great Pyramid is something like 430 feet.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it just actually says here on Wikipedia. It actually does say height, and then it says antenna or spike, and that's actually in Wikipedia. So it's even getting questioned there. But yeah, you were.
Oh, so that is huge. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, that's quite big. But
so 4 million. Come here, just before we wrap things up. Just David, is there anything else that you want to throw out to any of the listeners, anything that you feel would be important, maybe an answer to a question that we haven't asked or no one has asked, or even just to promote your own site or your own book? I know you did mention the book earlier, but I mean, do feel free. The floor is yours there if you have anything.
Well, I appreciate that. People have been asking me about when they can see me talk, and it is important for me to remember to talk about that. A lot of times I forget. I have actually 3 events coming up in February. The first one is the Atlanta Truth Convention. It's in Atlanta, Georgia, and there's a lineup of wonderful speakers. It's really like a disclosure event, because you got Dr. Stephen Greer, who's doing a major keynote on Saturday. You got Bob Dean, who's one of the best insider UFO whistleblowers who worked in the Black Ops and is now coming out in the open. Great public speaker. He's going to be there. And, of course, I'm doing a big keynote on Friday and a post-conference on Sunday. I encourage everybody to sign up for that, because it's a really substantial lineup, and that's why I picked it. They asked me to do it, and I said, wow, these speakers, you bet. Stanton Friedman's going to be there, a bunch of really cool speakers. So then I also have the Conscious Life Expo, which is the first time I'm announcing here on your show that I'm actually doing that again this year. And I don't remember which weekend that is in February, but you can look on their website, consciouslifeexpo.com. And I'm going to be doing panels, and I'm going to be doing a lecture and a post-conference workshop. So you can go see any of those individually or see all of them. That's a real metaphysical party. There's just so many people show up because there's all these exhibitors and there's all these speakers, and it's a huge festival of metaphysics. And then lastly, I have a conference coming up in February that's for Miami, where I'm going to be speaking the whole weekend. That's a 16-hour lecture that goes on over the course of 3 days. Everybody gets a chance to meet me, shake my hand, get a hug. And we have a great time. It's a wonderful group energy that we create there. I have 2 more extensive tours coming up. In addition to a series of dates, we have Denver, Colorado, we got Boston, a whole bunch of cities, one per month that you can look at on my website. So wherever you may be, if you're listening to this from the U.S., or if you want to travel over here to a particular spot, there's lots of choices. I also have Canadian Rockies trip that's coming up in July. It's actually my favorite sacred tour I've done. We're doing the same kind of event we did before. The Canadian Rockies are as wonderful and as majestic as the Swiss Alps, so we're going to be going to places like Banff, where you really get to see these mountains. It's just a stunning, stunning set of places to go visit. And we all take over this one little house, this chateau. So the only people there are people in the group. And we saw UFOs last year. Nobody woke me up, though, which I was really upset about, actually.
Okay.
But there were UFOs outside. They were far away, but people were watching them zipping around in the air. Probably not extraterrestrial. They were probably from some sort of government program, but they show up a lot at night out there because it's in the middle of Alberta, Canada, in the middle of nowhere. After like 1:32 a.m. is when they start to show up, apparently. So
wow,
that's a really phenomenal tour. We also have Italy coming up, and that's in, I believe, September, October region. And the reason why I'm doing Italy is because there's a lot of pyramids out there. And so we're going to hit off all the interesting sites that people like to go, like Rome and all these places, but we're also going to spend some time looking at these places where there appear to be pyramids that look just like mountains. And we're going to try to go hike on those pyramids and see if we can find any evidence of them being artificial. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We get a lot of really great things to do on that trip. And in general, I did just release this Access Your Higher Self. It started as an online conference. We wanted to be able to let people see the video, but then the video didn't work very well. So people can still buy that and watch it. It's just that my voice is not synchronized with the video. But then what I did is I got a guy from the History Channel to come over here and film me. And I redid the conference, but I added to it. I added more content. It's a series of 4 videos. And we post-produced it with motion graphics, and it looks really, really phenomenal. I've already watched the first 2 out of 4, and we're expecting production to be finished tonight, Sunday night, here in America. And then we're going to be making that available. So it's going to be the same price, $77. You can watch the whole video, and you can watch the original, which is a little bit different. And that is going to give a complete training on how to access your higher self. I break it down step by step, all the different ways in which you can do this, from the most simple to the most elaborate. So you could use it to do, tarot card readings. You can expand your meditation practice. You can learn how to access your dreams and remember them and figure out what they mean. And you can ultimately learn how to actually bring in verbal messages from your higher self that you can write down or dictate into a tape recorder, transcribe them, and get an actual dialogue going with this higher part of yourself. And again, there is a potential for people to misuse this. I don't want people to use it in a way that makes them feel like they've become the Messiah or something like that. And I always encourage you to be skeptical of your own results.
Yeah.
But I've now put the tools out, and we've had a phenomenal response to that. People who have already watched the original video were very happy. And when they see the new one, they're going to be much, much happier. It's really great. So as far as information is concerned, the one thing I did want to kick in that I haven't mentioned so far is these bird deaths and fish deaths.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Talk about that.
And what I'm seeing is I've been talking about this insider war going on behind the scenes that I call China's October surprise. There does appear to be a strong resistance to the New World Order in the world governments, specifically the Brazil, Russia, India, China, Argentina is where a lot of this is coming from. And Russia has kind of taken the lead to a large degree, but so has China. And the story goes that China was contacted by, it appears to be the people who were damaged by the Roswell crash, and I say people even though they weren't people born on Earth. Those people were held in captivity by the U.S. and they were denied human rights. They apparently went to China. They could see in the future what China would become and have been collaborating with them behind the scenes. Now, it appears that I've gone into detail on this on my website, a whole series of crazy equipment failures, including nuclear missiles powering down, nuclear aircraft carriers owned by the UK powering down, nuclear power plants powering down, military equipment powering down. It's an astonishing variety of things that happen. The Australian national airline Qantas had a series of airplane failures, and then there was a Princess cruise ship that completely failed while it was out at sea, had all of its power systems go down. The UK had a nuclear submarine, and right as it was going on its maiden voyage, it suddenly powered down. All of this, so I'm being told by very credible insiders, is the result of China, who is now mobilizing against the, what I call, old world order, to bring them down. And they're using this exotic technology, which apparently, one of the things that's been going on is we're only seeing a very small percentage of what's actually being zapped with these technologies. The much more elaborate process is involving zapping the military equipment that's classified that could be used to fake an alien invasion and terrify people. Apparently all that stuff is being blown up, deactivated, wiped out, and it's a massive, massive problem. In fact, I've been away on Christmas break. I had to finish my book, so I haven't been able to speak to anybody on the inside in like almost 3.5 weeks now. So I don't really know what the current status is, but it's bad for them and good for us in the sense that they're experiencing a complete collapse, and they're realizing, we're just not going to be able to pull this off because these guys have pulled out a trump card that we never expected. So now you're seeing all these birds and fish dying, and I haven't been able to speak to any insiders yet, but I expect that what I'm going to hear is that they are the casualties in this energy weapon war that is now getting very, very hot. All the stuff that the Chinese seem to have been doing so far does not appear to actually harm any life forms. I don't think the ETs that are helping us are the ones causing this, but I do know that there are defense technologies that they have that involve using energy beams as countermeasures against those types of attacks. And I believe it's the countermeasures that they're having to use it much more. And when they do, you're seeing the birds falling and their bodies are all crushed on the inside. Believe me, that's not the result of some truck driver hitting a flock of birds as he's driving. I mean, it's not fireworks. These skeptical explanations are ludicrous.
Wasn't that in the news, David, there recently about a load of blackbirds just falling out of the sky for no apparent reason?
Yeah, there is. And if you actually study it more, you find out that this is happening all over the world. And it's not only happening to birds, it's happening to fish.
Yeah.
And they don't know what's doing it, but the UK Daily Mail is one online source that has written 2 very poignant articles to describe this. And in my new update, which I'm about to do on my website, I'm going to be linking to those articles, because when you actually see all the data spread out, it's astonishing. And I do think this is part of an overall campaign where the old world order is fighting back with the technology that they have, but they wouldn't be doing this unless they were absolutely desperate. You have to remember, the whole key in all of this kind of skullduggery is avoid detection. You don't want to be seen. You don't want to be spotted. You don't want undue attention. I think that the Gabrielle Giffords assassination was obviously it was intended to kill her. I think the evidence is overwhelming that it was a Manchurian Candidate, mind control kind of kid who was used. And we can even trace most likely where he got the training. And I think that it's possible that her husband was going to disclose something. It's possible that she was involved in this in some way. She might have been the senator who was going to come out and actually start the disclosure ball rolling, start the congressional hearings, as I was talking about before. That's all certainly possible. The apparent effort to kill her has failed. I haven't looked at the news since I got up this morning, but she was still alive as of yesterday and responding to commands, and the brain surgery appeared to be successful. So that's a wonderful thing that she wasn't actually assassinated. But obviously, when they do these types of assassinations, the intent is to try to draw the public's eye away from whatever is on the table and get them focusing on something else.
Yeah.
And I think that they would not be doing this. They would not be having birds falling out of the sky. And they would not be assassinating politicians in daylight unless they were so desperate that they had to do these really blatant things that they could get caught because they got nothing left. And it's actually, if you can get past the obvious tragedy of people being shot and of birds dying and fish dying, there is a silver lining in this storm cloud, and the silver lining is that this is all an indication that the war is heating up and that they are desperately, desperately trying to forestall their own defeat, which I think is going to be happening pretty darn soon.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see some really interesting developments coming pretty quickly because this is all signs of great desperation that this stuff is happening.
That's the general feeling that we're getting. I'll say with this year and 2012, in the next 2 years, obviously I've seen the documentary that Lindsay Williams talked about. I don't know whether you've seen that yourself regarding the next 2 years. He was kind of he's a pastor in the States who had had one of the global elites confide in him. And the guy who was about 89, he was due to go in for surgery. He didn't know whether he was going to survive it, and he said, "Oh, to hell with it." And he just told them what would be happening in the next 2 years. He said one thing about these people that are the global elites: they don't live in cities, and there's a number of them actually live in Alaska. Now, I don't know how true that is. I haven't got any other information to back that up, but this is what Lindsay Williams was saying. And he was just talking about the next 2 years, and you know.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that Lindsay Williams came out with is basically identical to what my insiders were telling me. And I didn't even know that until I published about it, and then people started to link me to his radio shows on Alex Jones and so forth. I do think that these are things that they plan, but again, just because they plan something doesn't mean it's going to work.
Yeah.
They'd love to have martial law. They'd love to have 4 billion people die, to reduce the population of the Earth so that it's quote-unquote good for the environment. I mean, this is all stuff they'd like to do, but they're not allowed to do it. And that's why I keep saying the ETs are not mute bystanders that just have to stand by and look as these people cause destruction. These people are only able to do what they're allowed to do. They're kept on a leash. They know that it's there. They don't like it. But they're also allowed to think that they can get away with more than they really can. And now, because of what's happening with the ETs shutting their technology down, they're shocked and horrified because up until now they were under the assumption that they could do whatever they wanted. Nothing would stop them. The ETs are just going to stand by and watch helplessly as they do this. And now all of a sudden the ETs are fighting back and they're zapping everything. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see what comes out of this because I do believe we're in some of the darkest moments now. And then when things start to brighten up, there's going to be a global awakening that should be very intriguing to watch happening.
Isn't there a universal law somewhere along the lines where the ETs can't actually, like Star Trek, where they can't actually go down to the planet and affect what's going on the planet?
Not until the people are ready for it.
Oh, okay.
That's the trick.
Okay.
Once we're ready, once we invite it, then they will. And I think enough people know the truth now.
Yeah.
That the game is changing, you know?
Yeah.
People want to know, and just because a few people are negative about it and don't want to hear it, apparently we're now in a mode where enough people do want it that more and more stuff is being allowed to happen.
Yeah. And is that the kind of the information being allowed out after years of being because we're getting that in the UK, especially where there's loads of information being released now. Through the request for, there's a certain law you can request information that's being buried. We notice that over here there's a lot of information from the UK coming out that the UK government is releasing bit by bit, not all in one go, but it's coming out bit by bit, and people are learning about things that they didn't know about, that was hidden from them.
Yeah, and it's only going to keep ramping up more and more. The plan is for full disclosure with plausible deniability. And as we get closer to 2012, it's going to get more intense. And now 2012 is only, the beginning of 2012 is less than a year away. Yeah. And so this year should be very interesting. And I think somebody's going to break the dam pretty soon. And there's going to be a flood of information. And as Richard Hoagland was saying, you can't be halfway pregnant. Once you get pregnant, you're pregnant. And once this really starts to happen, I think it's going to be a flood of information. I think that the public who hasn't been really following this is going to have to scramble to try to understand it and try to get information about it. And I think that when that starts to happen, that shows like what you're doing and stuff like what I'm doing is going to be heard and seen by a lot more people because they want to know the truth.
Yeah.
And now that they find out that it's true, they're going to be scrambling to know as much as they can, as quickly as they can. And it's a very, very complex discussion, obviously.
The Stephen Greer Disclosure Project, I was watching the Stephen's documentary, or the show he did, and he was talking about that. You know, he did talk to Clinton, and he was saying he was going to release the information, and he was asked not to. And then he did say to Barack Obama that, well, I'm going to give you a year, and if you don't say anything within a year, then we are going to go off and disclose it ourselves. Now, that year has passed us, and there's still no information, which is very strange that Stephen's in, you know, a disclosure project, but yet nothing's being disclosed. Now, I don't know whether he's waiting for the right opportunity or what's going on there. I'm not too sure. Do you know anything of what Stephen's up to on that side?
Well, I'm going to find out. I mean, he's going to be speaking at this Truth Convention I'm doing in just over a month. It's actually less than a month, I think, now, in Atlanta, Georgia. He's going to be there, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to meet again and talk privately like we have before at another event, and I'm going to learn more. But I have been in contact with these people off and on, and their perspective is that there are some balls in motion, there are some things that are getting ready to happen, and there is going to be a right time. So I don't think they've dropped the idea. I think that, as I've been saying, disclosure involves a window, and the window has to be open before it can occur. And that window, for example, I know that there is a very substantial element within the Pentagon that wants to have disclosure, but what they're doing is they're making sure that all the bad seeds have been weeded out before they do this, and they've been systematically going through and trying to root out people who could potentially throw this off once they try to do this. And it's been a really, actually quite aggressive campaign, and apparently they're very close to being finished with their house cleaning, and you're seeing a lot of shifts going on in geopolitics and so forth. So, yeah, something is getting ready to happen. Apparently, Obama had been scheduled to make the official announcement in August of last year, and for whatever reason it was thrown off at that time. That was another version of the same announcement that was going to be made in November of 2009, and it actually didn't happen either. I think the television show The Event is obviously forecasting an open government announcement from Obama's administration about extraterrestrials that are human, that have been in captivity on Earth. I think a lot of the stuff in that show is true, and it was astonishing to see that show come out in terms of how perfectly it fit with what I had already told people was going to happen before. And I don't think that NBC is copying off of my website. I think that it's all the same facts that we're discussing here.
Yeah.
So 2011 could very well be the year of disclosure. I really hope that we don't have to wait much longer, because I want to see some action get going before we get to 2012, so that there's time for this interesting change to happen in society before whatever energetic shift might be happening. But it is also possible that we may not see anything until 2012. But either way, what we are going to see almost for certain is a massive ramping up of the available evidence, including visual sightings, including whistleblowers coming forward, including information being leaked by governments, including movies. All kinds of stuff is going to be happening. I'm making a movie called Convergence. A lot of people have been asking me about that. What's the status on that? We had a little bit more delay on getting our script finalized. We do expect to have a finished script in February. I can tell you that we have some very, very wonderful directors that we're looking at, and some great acting talents that we can attach. So this is going to be a serious mainstream film.
Yeah.
It could be very, very successful, based on the content and based on the fact that people are so hungry for another movie like this. It's going to feel the way that Contact felt. And I'm using the same writer, obviously, so we have the potential to really hit that same buzz. And so I'm really excited about the future. It's been a wonderful thing for me to get on Ancient Aliens on History Channel. I was in 7 out of 10 episodes for Season 2. And so now I've put a face to my website that the public is seeing on regular television. And some of those episodes are just fantastic. In fact, most of them that I'm in. And the ones that I'm not in. I mean, it's a great... Season 2 was great. Mm. And so I'm now able to be much more involved in the disclosure process to the mainstream public, and I expect that my own trajectory is going to change, and I will have more and more of that type of work starting to come in. That's what TV executives have been telling me, and I want to make sure that it's done on my terms, and I'd like to be able to help shape the content of these shows, because there's a lot of material I have to share that has not been on television. So hopefully there's going to be a season 3 of Ancient Aliens. I don't know yet, but I'm hopefully going to be more involved as a producer in that season and be able to help shape the episodes more. And so I'm certainly keeping busy, and I'm doing the best I can to try to help humanity be ready for this. And I really want to commend both of you guys for the work that you're doing, because the people of Ireland need this voice, and now we're going to be able to share that voice with the world. Since you've generously offered for me to be able to use these MP3s on my website, I really appreciate both of you for that. So thank you.
No problem. Obviously, we say, David, we appreciate you come on the show. You're mindful of information. And the thing is, I would say to you, and I'm sure you're aware of this, you be careful as well.
Oh, of course. I'm always watching my back, and I have a very strong circle of protection from higher forces that, as long as I do my part and I don't drop my principles and become a disgusting caricature of the ideals that I hold, then I should be very, very safe and very well protected based on what they're telling me. And so I work very hard to live by the message that I give, so that I don't have a hypocrisy in my own life where I'm not fulfilling what it is that I'm telling people that is the optimal path spiritually, emotionally, etc.
Well, I'd say the message for Stephen, if you do see Stephen Greer, will be basically, I for one, I have to say I was a little bit disappointed when I heard that Stephen would give Barack Obama a year and say enough's enough, people need to know about this. We are ready for it. The consciousness of the planet has reached the level where people are hungry, they need the information. And the fact that he's in the Disclosure Project, and he said to himself, when he did a seminar in Spain, he said to himself, it's just funny that he's involved in the Disclosure Project, but he can't tell us what's going on. And I understand there has to be a window of opportunity that has to happen before that, before he can put the information out there. But
look at what happens if you try to move before the window. You get shot through the head. I mean, it just happens. So I think Gabrielle Gifford's assassination attempt was over this issue, and the window is basically that they want to try to nullify this influence so that the people who try to do it don't get killed. Maybe that guy Wheeler was trying to do it too. I don't know. But I mean, there's been 2 very strange political deaths recently, and I think it's all related to this stuff going. So my understanding is, I'm not trying to negate what you're saying. It's just to say that the window phenomenon is that you make a move once you can do so safely. And obviously there's always going to be risk, but I think that there is a very concerted effort being made to eliminate the risk as much as possible before the big move is made. And I think the birds falling out of the sky, the fish dying, China is making its move. There's a lot of pieces moving. I really don't think you're going to need to be upset about things not happening much longer. I really don't.
Well, that's excellent news. What can we say? I look forward to going on your website and then catching up even after this interview of stuff you're going to do down the line. I look forward to it, because the one thing I do like about you, David, is you have you have morals. You know exactly, what way you want to go and put the information out, and not just be somebody jumping on the bandwagon. And I know there's other things. We'll talk off air. There's other things that you're interested in, but we'll talk off air. But I'll tell you for now, can you just, I'd just like to thank you for being on the show. If you stay with us, and what we'll do is we'll wrap up the show, and we'll have it just to talk to you when we're off air.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, and a final note from me. David has talked about his website, and for those interested, it's divinecosmos.com, and it's a fantastic website. Everything that David has spoke about, it's all on there. It's all very good stuff. And the video that David is releasing, the new version about accessing your higher self for $77. That is a mere €59. So I think David did say that's four. It's going to come in 4 parts. So that works out at €15 per part. So well worth. It's well worth the money.
Definitely. So, from us, David's going to stay just in the background there for a minute, but from us, we say good night for myself, Alan James.
And from Stephen George.
And we'll see you, we'll be talking to you next week. We were looking to hopefully have Ted Gunderson on next Sunday. I'll be ringing Anthony J. Hilda during the week there, and we'll just confirm whether Ted can actually do next Sunday. If he can, that'll be another great radio show, loads of information. But for now, we'll say goodbye. And David, if you want to say goodbye to our listeners there.
Well, yeah, I thank everybody for listening, and we have some really hard times going on. I had some dreams showing me that people are going through a lot of distress right now, and I think that the political shootings and the birds are making people really scared. But again, my dreams always keep saying, it looks bad now, but it's about to get a lot better. And so I've consistently said that. When the oil spill was going on, everybody thought, oh my God, it's the end of the world. Everybody's going to be dead within 6 months. And that was capped. You know, all the fear and doom talk that it would never be able to be capped was not true. And I think you got to just keep in mind that there's people out there that are hired, paid disinformants who are out there trying to get you to be scared because there's a collective mind opening up. And if once it opens up, these guys will not be able to stay in power at all. And about the only thing left they can do to try to stop it from happening is to keep you afraid. So if you do your job and do your research and learn the truth and don't fall prey to the propaganda, you don't need to be taken in by this stuff. And you will be able to see positive silver lining because that's the way this game is written. It was always intended for the good guys to win. It's difficult when you have to wait for it and be patient. It doesn't all happen tomorrow morning. But, sooner or later, we're going to see some very big shifts happening here, and I really eagerly await that time.
Definitely. I think in the next 2 years we're going to see big changes that we've never seen before. So it's going to be fantastic. So we'll say goodnight to all our listeners. Thanks a lot for listening in. It's been fantastic. Thanks a lot for all your input on the chat facility. Really, really appreciate that. David, stay with us there for a minute. And we'll be talking to you next week. So from me, Alan James, good night.
And from me, Stephen George again, good night. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Open your mind.